stand up. I've been sitting on this thing all.
He said 5 minutes.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah. A little bit. Whew. Cat's in here now. You gotta get the cat out. I still sound okay? Yeah, my wife came in and wanted to show me something there.
Oh yeah, it sounds perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. What's up, Patrick? Patrick, can you hear me? I want to ask you. Good. Hey, Luke Gygax is on. Wow.
Yay!
Hey,
Awesome.
Luke.
Welcome.
We're still waiting for Eric Boyd. He should be on. He said in 3 to 4 minutes. So good to see you, Luke. I got Matt's email and I sent him a response back. So we're good. Whenever you guys want to meet, it's cool. Get that all worked out. Oh, that was nice, Patrick. Thank you so very much. What's up, Tim Enoch? How you doing? Dun. I got Anna and me on. Just waiting for Eric. I'm really excited about this conversation because Gary Julian gave me some real great tidbits that I did not know. Found some stuff in some publications. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is going to be a really cool discussion tonight. And then next week, you know, we go to the dark side next week, right, Anna?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we go to the dark side. The question next week will be which dark side?
Which dark side?
Or the Forgotten Realms dark side. So yeah.
Luke, I got a great relationship with Chuck Combo and Troller Games sponsors the channel, and they do. Oh, they're great. We actually have a Reaper miniatures and a Troller Game gift certificate giveaway tonight. So, yep, yeah, they're fantastic. I know your Gaxmore 5e came out, and it's awesome. I hear a lot of great things about it.
Yep.
So it's really cool. Having some fun. But I said the dark side. If you want the dark side next week, it's all about dark elves, and I'm honored to have on the show next week Ed Greenwood himself is coming on with Eric Menke and Tony Winslow Brill, and we're gonna shoot it out between Greyhawk Dark Elves and Forgotten Realms Dark Elves. That's gonna be a fun one. This is gonna be two awesome Sunday night shows back to back. Yeah, it's gonna be cool. So hopefully you're good, Luke. Good to see you on. Thank you so very much. Yeah, Reaper's great too. I mean, Reaper was an early sponsor. Fantastic. Hey, Dale, what's going on, man? DM, what's up? Dave, how you doing? Got a lot of good stories and good news to come up to catch up with once we get to have this nice discussion with Eric tonight. He was so kind to come on. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Flyers are 2-0. Makes me happy. Amongst everything else. I didn't post his info, long shot, but if you want it, I'd give it to you. I put it in Blue Box's chat. So, it's early. I know, it's early in the hockey season. But, yeah. All right. I got to. I may have to send him a link. So Eric needs to join it. Here he comes.
Awesome.
Hey, Dalius. Eric!
Hello.
Hello!
How are you?
I'm doing great, doing great. Thank you so very much for hopping on tonight. We were right.
See you.
Last sponsor ad going on now of 6, so trying to get through that.
Yeah, they can hear us but not see us.
Yeah, our screen will pop up shortly here, but thank you for coming on. I'm really excited about this discussion because, man, a lot of things I do in my campaign are all because of your doings in the 90s. Whew.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I'll discuss.
Yeah,
We're on Twitch. There's going to be a chat going on Twitch, and I will have it covered. I'll take the questions from the audience, but if you want to participate in Twitch, let me know, and I'll give you that information.
Oh yeah, if you want to put send me the link, I'll just look at it as it goes.
Surely.
cool. Yeah.
Now I want all the stuff they're showing in the ads.
Oh, yeah. Well, isn't it awesome? Infinite Dimensions is there you go. It's one of my 2 3D print companies, and this is their Kickstarter that is just ending. Unbelievable stuff. Them and Gamescape 3D. We got a lot of it on our game table because I play miniatures, 1E2E old school style. So what's up, Bill? Bill the Master Crafter, Sashar Scorn. He does all the terrain work and crafting and painting for us. And yeah, so it's some fun things.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah.
So
where are you guys located physically?
South
Hey,
Jersey
Southern-
for me, outside of
Southern
Philly.
California for me.
Oh wow. Okay.
Where are
I
you?
grew up in New Jersey, but
Where'd
I
you-
live in Michigan,
Where'd you grow up in Jersey?
Monmouth County.
Okay, not too far. I grew up in Camden County. I live in Gloucester County now. So
Yeah, we lived on one of the rivers that cut into the city.
near Tom's River?
Just north of there, the Navesink.
Oh, okay. Point Pleasant?
A little bit farther north than that too. It's almost to Middletown.
Okay, cool. I've been here my whole life. So what year did you leave?
Well, let's see. I guess 90 was when I graduated from college, and I came out to grad school in Michigan. And although my parents just sold their house last year, so I still felt like I lived there, even though I haven't for a long time.
That's cool.
Yeah, the Zoom background I have up is the view out our back on our back porch. So
Nice.
it was really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
And that when we had that hurricane in 2012, it got beat bad. That whole area. Wow.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
obliterated.
No, my parents' house flooded.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
It was quite the expedition to dig them back out, because they had so they got about 7 feet of salt water in their basement, which was important that it wasn't 8 feet. Because 8 feet means it hits the joists, which means it gets sucked up the walls, which means you basically are gutting the first floor. But 7 feet then didn't get above the cinder block, so it was recoverable. But they had, a ton of stuff in there, and all kind of collapsed. So we couldn't even get the utilities in the house until we got the house up.
Yeah, it was a disaster, and it really was. It was awful, and I remember because I'm in the building industry, and it just was like crazy how much work needed to be done all up and down the coast. I mean, Hackett, Hoboken, all that. The flooding was terrible. But we got to get on a more positive note here because it's going to be a fun discussion tonight, I think. So I got some of your accomplishments up. Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone. Eric, do you prefer the L and Boyd? Eric Boyd.
Eric is fine.
Eric Boyd. Here we come on. So good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm J.K. Lord Gazumba, and I have with me, as always, my partner in crime, Anna B. Meyer.
Hello.
And a very special guest tonight, Mr. Eric Boyd. Eric, thanks for coming on.
Yes, happy to be here.
So you were posting something on, I think it was Sages at Greyhawk, in reference, in a response to something, and I'm like, oh my God, this is my opportunity. So I reached out to you, and I was like, wow, this is great, because I know you were talking about something I want to discuss in a little bit, and that was Bastions of Faith, one of my favorite references from that era.
That is a great one.
Yeah, and it sounded like that you have a lot to do with that in assisting our friend there, Bruce Cordell, on the writing of it. So I'm excited about checking that out. Definitely.
No, happy to.
Yep. So you have been freelance your entire time? Have you ever?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I know I talked to Scott Casper, and he says, "Hey, great catch! You're an original Grey Talker." So, is that when
I did do that?
Is that when you started? Like, when did your gaming start? How'd you get involved with writing? Like, what, you were going back to the 70s or 80s?
Yeah.
Or?
Oh, yeah. No. So, let's see. So I think I learned to play from the old basic box set that had like a built-in adventure. I don't even remember what the adventure is called anymore, but I had a family friend. They brought their kid over, and he had this box set, and he's like, I'm going to teach you D&D. And so we spent about 2 hours learning the rules, and I rolled up my first character. I think he was an elf back then, like an elf that was both the race and the class, you know?
Yeah, Holmes Basic box set. Yeah.
Yep. And so I rolled up an elf, and I think I went into the dungeon. I think I died in the first room fighting 3 goblins, and I was hooked.
Same here. Yeah.
You know, it was just like that. But yeah, no, then you know, I always liked it. I got to read more than I got to play, but I did get to play some and had a great time through high school and college. But when I got to grad school, I don't know, I realized I liked writing, and so you know, everybody's got to get their foot in the door somewhere. So I started writing articles for Polyhedron, and they were at least willing to look at them. And they at the same time, I was really active. So I was learning a lot about the realms and writing about the realms, but I also really loved Greyhawk. And so, you know, there was a lot of different discussion groups around back then. There was Grey Talk, there was the Realms list. On AOL, there was a bunch of different things that you could do. You know, lots of communities that grew up there. And then the Earth Journal started coming out.
Yes.
Really liking that. And I wrote a couple articles for some of the early versions of that. And I guess the thing that got me working for Wizards the most was, so I started, I'm kind of a completist. I like to do everything and finish it out. And so like in the Realms, Ed Greenwood would drop off god names left and right, like obscure little mentions. That just bugged me that, well, you can't just mention a god and not detail their whole faith. I mean, seriously.
True.
Yeah.
And so I started writing them up in Polyhedron. And so Julia Martin and Ed Greenwood were working on something called Faiths and Avatars, which was the first
You mean
Realms God book. That's the one.
I'm ready. I'm ready, man.
I kind of went from like, can I give you some suggestions? Do you mind if I read it? I just did a little rewriting to what do you want me to write next?
I can tell, and that's what I said in our Facebook chat a little while ago. I can tell your influence because your style in the Polyhedrons is the same as in these books. You know, how you have it all formatted, and I'm like, this is perfect. So yeah, that's
it was a nice format. The only thing I really hated were the god stat blocks. I always found those completely useless.
They are,
but they were kind of required. I mean, what I would have preferred to do with that page count, and of course the page count was ridiculous anyway. Back then I thought it was fine that, you know, it was like such micro type. But now that I'm a little bit older and my eyes, now I need glasses and my eyes are gone, I'm like, who the heck let me write this much? Because the word count is so tiny and the font is really hard to read.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. And there's 191 pages in this book.
Yeah.
So it is, and this is, it's sad that we don't have these for Greyhawk, right? But
I always wanted to write the equivalent one for Greyhawk.
It's not too late.
Well,
I could, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
I have. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that I have harangued Gary enough to hop on at some point tonight. That the Mr. Because everyone thinks he's a bot, but he comes on once in a blue moon because I know he said you played in one of his games early on.
I did. I was trying to remember the character. I think it was related to Melf, but we had this really, really interesting campaign, and he was a fantastic DM in terms of setting. It was one of those play by email campaigns, so of course they go really slow, but you'd spend your time writing up the description and thinking everything through, and it was just like generating Greyhawk content left and right was the whole point of the adventure. So yeah, no, I had a wonderful time playing. He was a fantastic DM. Really enjoyed playing with him.
Well, there has been a renaissance in the last year in the Greyhawk community. Cannon Fire is going strong. The site's going strong. The Discord's going great, and a lot of articles are coming out with that and with at Greyhawk Online. So there's some really fantastic things, and Gary's at the forefront of it. So we're excited to really have.
No, it's really nice to see that coming back a little bit too. And I was thumbing through some of the Earth journals a few months ago, and just thinking, wow, they've been getting better and better and better.
They have been, and Christoph has done a great job in putting them together, and there's some great writers. I didn't have an article in this one, but I've had them in like the last 4, and then you got Gary, you got John Birchfield, Carlos did some back in the day, William Henry Dvorak, all the people in our community, Rich Longitalis are writing articles now for it, so it's and they're all talking to each other, and it's really exciting time. And that's why I'm really happy to you said you would come on tonight, because there's information I guarantee you here that I have that Gary helped me out with that I don't think anyone has seen in 20 years. Especially no, seriously, and especially the Polyhedron magazine stuff, because people don't realize they should go there. And
there was a lot of good stuff in there back in the day, and some of it's really, really obscure. So like if you, I mean, even the weird stuff, like even if you're just a DM whose players, like the second you even put the image on the screen, they're like, oh, okay, this is a whatever, this is an Adiug, therefore we got to do this and this and this, and it's like your character doesn't know that, but they're just like instantly into the I've memorized the entire monster manual kind of thing. And so like there's some really, really obscure monsters I guarantee most of your players will never have heard of back in Polyhedron. There's some Greyhawk lore, there's Forgotten Realms lore, there's all sorts of neat little tidbits, and it was kind of more out on a limb, I'd say. So there was a little more freedom to do it than like what they would put in Dragon or something like that. So, you have some bad, but you have some good too, is how I would put it.
Well, it seems to me that you really were the brainchild behind the second edition, how gods were viewed. I mean, I that's what I see here, is that like you really took it, and the Forgotten Realms books encapsulated it, and then because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know how to build a specialty priest. The rules are right in there, and all the spheres are right in there. You made it pretty easy to do it, and that was like one of my favorite things from 1E2E, and I still am a 1E2E person.
Flavored it too. So
Say it again. I'm sorry, I cut you
off. Put in flavor and flavor to it too. Not only the mechanics, it was the
Yeah. Well, that to me was the fun part, was like I didn't ever want anybody to say I'm playing the cleric, right? That just was such a, because that was sort of this quasi medieval monkish kind of spellcaster that assumed sort of a, I don't know, monotheistic religion or something like that didn't take advantage of any of the richness of the setting. And so what I really liked doing, particularly in the 2E books, was like, how does this god differ from that god? Absolutely. And in some respects, the Greyhawk pantheons are a little more interesting in at least one respect than I would say the Realms one. So, the way we've kind of figured it out over time in the Realms is that if you just think of the human gods, like there were all these different isolated cultures and they all had their own pantheons. And then when the culture started to mix, the pantheon started to mix. And so by the time you get to the modern day realms, like 80-90% of the pantheons have merged into a common human pantheon.
Yeah.
There's still a couple in the east and the south that are different, but for the most part they had merged. But if you look at Greyhawk, you still have your cultural pantheons and they really haven't integrated.
Yeah.
And then so you have two opportunities for conflict, because to me religion, a polytheistic D&D campaign is all about conflict between the religions. And so if you've got two gods of the sea, well, how do their followers get along with each other? Or if you've got two gods of war, how does that work? So you can get this inner pantheon conflicts, and then within a pantheon you can get conflict as well, where you have a god of the dead and the god of the light or whatever it is, and how they kind of battle with each other. I remember when I think it was like around Dragon 67, I'm guessing on the number, but it was like, I remember the write-ups they were doing of like Foltis and a couple others.
Oh yeah,
Just really spurred my imagination.
Tritherian, all the ones.
Yeah, that whole little series there. I was running to the store to buy those issues because I couldn't wait to see what the next one would come out. And then when I got to doing some 3E stuff, I didn't have a chance to do this in Greyhawk, although there's no reason why you couldn't. We came up with this mechanic for heresies. And then, you can do all these things where, you have different groups within a religion that have a different interpretation. And then you can get even farther into the machinations between the political things, or in between the religious factions. And to me, it's just a rich source of conflict and way to differentiate your character.
You're like, you've transported, you're inside me, man. I mean, it's just because, all right, here we go.
This is it's awesome. Yeah.
Specialty priest books, 2 of them, NPCs,
oh, nice.
every deity. There's 42 of them. I have.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Everyone with their own spell lists, their own abilities, their own little quirks, and that's just, I love the 2nd edition Specialty Priest. That and Elementalists and the Wild Mage here and there are my 3 favorite things from 2E, definitely.
I love a lot of 2E. I actually play more 3E these days.
Okay.
Don't play that much 5E, a little bit just because my son likes it, but 2E and 3E were kind of my comfort zones. And I have found there's even other ways you can do it too. Like 3E at least has the summon monster lists, right? But I end up finding myself rewriting the summon monster list per faith, or per arcane group. This is what they specialize in. These are the monsters they would call. There's all sorts of ways like that you can make them unique.
So when you started out in the Grey Talk and with everything else, was Polyhedron your first job in the industry? Were you editing or just writing for it?
I was just writing for them.
Okay.
I had been so you asked earlier when I got started. I remember playing in a campaign at the hobby store before the Dungeon Master's Guide came out, the 1st edition one. So we only had the player's handbook and the monster manual. So that's kind of when I got my start, was remembering, like, we were all looking forward to that book with the Ifrit on the cover, But in terms of actually getting, I'd written for myself for many years, but in terms of getting published, Polyhedron was the easiest first step in the ladder. So I started writing for them. I told you how I kind of bootstrapped myself into the Faiths and Avatar project, but also I tried to write as much for Dungeon and Dragon as I could as well. Kind of build off things or take an idea and really run with it. I think my favorite dungeon adventure to write was Chris Perkins had sort of the idea for the first adventure path, the Mare of Dead Men.
I got him right here.
You remember that?
That
was kind of a weird one to start, because when they asked me to write the 5th one, they'd actually already written the first 4. They hadn't published any of them yet, but they were like weeks away from publishing them. And so I basically said, well, can I see them? And I read them through and I said, can I make any changes? And he said, not much. And so, the first thing I did was I said, well, can we stick a ring of Merkel in each one of them? And I'll figure out something that, if you find it in each one, it adds up to something. So I had enough time
There's
to
the
make that
cover.
change.
Yeah, there's the
And
cover
then,
for yours. Yep, right there.
Yep. And then the fifth one, and then the way the first four had started, all of them were like, you go to the castle where the paladin is camped out and he gives you a new job to do. And yep, that's the one. And I figured by the time you got to the fifth adventure, that would be boring as all heck. So I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's never played it, but essentially I turned it on the head, and you don't get the job from the paladin in the fifth one.
Well, the really cool thing about this was, for me, and I ran this when it first came out. And what's this? This 90 in the 94? I'm guessing here.
Yeah, somewhere around then. Yeah.
Yeah. I stole it and put it in Greyhawk.
There's no reason not to.
And I made it the Eye of Nerol.
Oh, perfect.
And there were rings in the roll, and there's 5 characters in my campaign who have them to this day. They do vampiric touch and all the effects of it. Yeah, it's I was a little later than that. I was 99 actually, but I loved them.
It all blurs together for me at this point.
Hey, trust me, man. I understand completely on that. As far as I've been playing for 40 some years, and it's just like, where did all the time go? But these were you're right. This is the pre-adventure path where there's 5 one after another in the Dungeon magazine articles, and the last one is in 73. Everyone, so go four back, and you're going to have. It is worth it. They're very good, and I would take a look at them all, and that's why I wanted. I'm so glad you brought them up. I took them near the Dreadwood in Keeland, made it a swampy area near there. Boom! I had my Mere Deadman.
Perfect.
And it is worth it, and it's not hard to convert over, and. Like I said, I wish there was more of this stuff out for Greyhawk, but we had Age of Worms. Did you participate in Age of Worms at all? I noticed
I did.
You did not. You were not a main author.
No, Savage Tide. Sorry. So I did 2 things.
Oh, great, cool.
So in Savage Tide, I wrote one of the adventures, and then in Age of Worms, in Dragon magazine, I was writing the realms conversions for the whole Age of Worms path. So that Dragon was publishing, like, here's how you convert Age of Worms into the realms. And so I wrote those.
Oh, okay.
And then for Savage Tide, I wrote the Wells of Darkness, which was like, I think the 3rd from the end or the 4th from the end. It was in the Abyss.
Okay. I mean, that's a good series as well. We had James Jacobs on, and there was a lot of.
Yep, no, it was a lot of fun to read, and particularly like the stuff where they built off of X1, which of course you could run in Greyhawk just as easily as anywhere else.
Eric Gary says it's always been in Greyhawk, by the way. Gary's lurking, so I'm trying. I'm like really trying to believe it.
I would believe it.
It's always been there. Far Shores.
Technically, it was X1 Karamikos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, that was a great series. I really enjoyed that one.
So
I think the adventure paths are actually fun. That's actually what I've been keeping myself busy with writing lately. Is as a pandemic exercise, is writing a horde-related campaign path. And you could do this just as easily in Greyhawk. The realms in the Savage North has orc hordes that boil forth and run down and wipe out civilization. And so for the campaign, actually for 2 campaigns I'm running in, I've been writing it up, hoping to put it on DM's Guild at some point. Cool. I'm writing a campaign where basically you start at 1st level, there's 18 adventures, and by 18th level you have to stop a horde pretty much single-handedly.
Wow.
18. But you kind of build and build and build up to it as you go.
And are you playing that through with your family or friends or?
I am. Yes. So again, for the pandemic, I'm playing one campaign. So I've been writing it in 3.5, and I'm converting it on the fly to 5th edition for my son and my nephews and their friends. And then I'm still running it in 3.5 for a bunch of my old fogey friends who are my age. But both of them are online, and we've done the whole thing virtually.
So when you mean old fogey friends, you play with Ed Greenwood still, don't you, a little bit?
I do talk to Ed a lot. He's not actually in the campaign, but almost everybody, but he's helped it a lot. But yeah, like Stephen Shend, who wrote a lot of the 2E and 3E stuff for Wizards, and George Crashhouse, who's always helped me with some of the Realms lore, Tom Costa, who's always helped me with a lot of my writing on monsters and everything else, and a whole bunch of old friends who've been helping me on behind the scenes on my writing. So that's always been the secret too, is that like as I was writing, is I would share it with other people just to make sure that I gotten the facts right and everything like that. And so this is like all the people that I ever did this with are in one campaign. So it's been a blast, you know, and you know, there's not a lot of good things about a pandemic, but nobody having anything to do on a Saturday night's a good one.
Yeah,
Yep.
it seems that we've all learned a lot about how to keep ourselves entertained
Yeah.
and I know the light bulb went on with me last year's GaryCon, where, and Luke, I know you're on, but we had 2 weeks to get everyone's scrambling to, almost, to get to that virtual con together, and then it went
Yep.
together. Anna and I had a great time doing all those
Yeah.
events, and
Mhm.
and so we're really
It turned out good, and then we've had lots of events afterwards. So
yes, absolutely.
there's a silver lining even to the worst of catastrophes.
Yeah, we
Thankfully.
try.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's always been the best thing about our community is that, people pull together and they work collaboratively and
Yeah.
they just make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
So back to Greyhawk. It sounds like you really you had a place in your heart for Greyhawk, but Forgotten Realms was where the opportunities were. Is that kind of
Mhm.
how I get?
I like them both. I know most people have a preference of one or the other, and I would say
Yeah.
I don't. I think they're both fantastic campaign settings.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're different. I the way I don't know that I specify the difference the way everybody else does. A lot of people say, Greyhawk is make it your own, and the Realms is like it's got just more than you can ever possibly read. But if you actually compare like the old folio for Greyhawk and the original box set for the Realms, they're about the same level of detail. So if you just took one or the other, you could completely go make your own campaign however you wanted it.
Yeah.
To me, the difference is um, a little more the Greyhawk, really is country based, even though some of the countries are barely countries, they're more regions, right? Because they don't really have a central authority. But when you draw a Greyhawk map, whether you're in the Bandit Kingdoms or whether you're in Keeland or wherever, what I
That's
mean?
true.
And the Realms is much more isolated
City
city-states
states, yeah.
with just
Mhm.
vast amounts of wilderness between them. And
Okay.
and
Yeah.
both of them are really, really neat, interesting settings. But to me, that once you see that split, you can really go in vastly different directions in terms of how the campaign evolves.
It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
What so when early on you wrote the Mirror of Dead Men, and you're writing for Polyhedron,
Yep.
and then at some point, so I'm assuming it was it still TSR, or was it WotC had just taken over at this point? This is still second edition era.
So I basically started, I think Fates and Avatars was 94 is what I want to say. And I'm blanking on when WotC bought TSR.
I think that's still TSR. I
I
think
think
so.
it was
But that,
still for a little bit.
96.
I would say that's very, very close to where.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
90.
I
This is
think.
96.
Yeah.
Yura got married, so I can't forget it. So
You're not supposed
Yeah.
to, yes.
Hey,
But
Mike.
yeah, no, so I started writing right about then, and I kind of took whatever opportunities they had. And as you mentioned before, there were a lot more Realms opportunities, of course, but I liked them both. So my hope actually had been, I wrote the 3 God books for the Realms. My hope had been to write at least 5 books. If I had been king for the day, I would have picked to write one on humanoids, really get into the
Yes.
cultural differences
Like-
of the different gods and what the effects are. And I would have written one on Greyhawk, at least
Oh,
one, maybe
damn.
two.
So I wanted.
Please, can you write that for Earth Journal or whatever, and then put it somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
I that would be fun. I would like
Yeah.
to do
That would have
Mhm.
been fantastic. So,
Yep.
Monster Mythology came out, and I guess that was
Yeah.
the alternate one to it. It was the blue covered.
Yep, Carl Sargent wrote a generic one, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because like of all that series of second edition DMGR books, I think that's the one I've read the most. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean it was the one that I liked the most, but it's the one I read the most. And he did a really great job of doing breadth. There's not a lot of depth in the write-ups. They're all really short, but it gives you just a ton to work with. And so if you go through like in Faiths and Avatars, you'll see that I put in the like God's friends, allies, and foes. There's a lot of names I pulled out of that book, out of the monstrous mythology. And so you could certainly do that. But I would probably, if I was going to write one, I would want to zoom in more on like the Orc Pantheon. So this is actually something I've been exploring lately, is like, we all tend to treat like the goblins as monolithic or orcs as monolithic, and not say what would be the cultural differences. So this is something that would apply just as easily in Greyhawk. So I came up with, in the Sword Mountains of north of Waterdeep, for instance, there was an event about 400 years ago when like blood rain fell out of the sky, and you had all these plagues that killed off the dwarves and the gnomes and let the orcs expand. It also led to the rise of the Church of Urtris, the orcish god of disease, which people don't normally spend a whole lot of time with. But then I started working out, well, what would a culture look like where that faith was dominant? And so, I came up with the Brotherhood of the Scarlet Scourge, which is like an orcish group of orc monks who all worship Urtris and are like the enforcers. And it's they really try to control the culture. So they would do things like they would infect all the orcs, and they wouldn't give them potions of cure disease. They would give them potions of delay disease. And so every day you had to go back for your potion of delayed disease if you wanted to stay alive, and it was a really good way of controlling people. So, and then you could imagine another culture of where the clerics of Shargus are dominant, right? And they would enforce through murders in the midnight, right? When murders at night is how they would keep everybody in line. Whereas Grumpsh is your stereotypical orc culture. And so you could keep going, and you could do that for every single race and culture, and sort of tease apart. And then like, if you're doing it in Greyhawk, you'd say, well, which of these religions are dominant in the Lort Mills, right? Versus, the mountain ranges to the south and the west, or to the northeast. And then you would get cultural differences as well. So I think you can have a lot of fun tearing apart these seemingly monolithic cultures just by looking at their religions.
What's great about that is it's rarely investigated and developed, and you're absolutely correct. And we talk about this all the time. Where do they get the tribe names from? A lot of them are just made up, and I think that would be, I could see a great, like, Luthik, the cave mother, having something with her, and something happen, reproduction, or just all sorts of wonderful things you could do.
So her in particular, as a for instance, we were taught, I was thinking it through, well, what would a culture dominated by her clergy look like? And so one of the things I came up with is a monster called a Luthurk, which is like a variant cave bear that they use to kind of like, that can actually dig through stone to tear the dwarves out of their little hidey holes. But the other is, she actually works through fertility, right? So she's kind of this goddess of the hearth and home, but she also creates this unbelievable fertility, which then creates population pressure, which forces conquest. And so she has her own way of ruling the orcs, basically. If the birth rate was lower, the orcs might have another option, but she makes it so that they don't.
I'm going to ask something, and you can say no if you want to.
Sure.
Any chance to get that monster?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and I promise to share it with the entire community. So
that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. Yes.
Awesome. That is fantastic. The resurgence is great, and I know that this the old school talk really gets everyone just excited about how they could take stuff that we did back 30 years ago or 20 or whatever, and incorporate it. And I think that flavor of Greyhawk is one thing about 5e. And I'm not bashing 5e, everyone. I'm not, but the Greyhawk flavor is gone. In 5e, it's gone, and it's a shame.
I think you could bring it back. I mean, I'm learning 5e. I'm getting there. it's interesting because the thing that sticks out to me is just how many more actions per round the characters get.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing because it just means it's more like I get 6 turns, you get 6 turns, as opposed to I get a turn, you get a turn. You know what I mean? It's still the same amount, but I think you can bring it back if you do it right. But you have to kind of go back and look at what they were trying to accomplish and what stuff they didn't do and what stuff they did do.
Okay.
I think if I was going to start with 5e and say I wanted to make it more Greyhawk, there's a lot of variants within the 5e rule set that don't necessarily fit well for Greyhawk. But if you took them off the table as options and replaced them with some of the classic Greyhawk groups, I think you could get some of that feeling back a little bit. I hope, at least. Well, my son plays 5e, right? So I want him to like Greyhawk just as much as I do.
We have a lot of streamers, right, Anna, who stream 5e and do Greyhawk, and we have
so meaning I've used everything from D&D for AD&D first edition, second edition, third edition, Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, even a bit of D&D fourth edition in between. So and you can flavor it Greyhawk. It's I think the game system is more like your style of play that it facilitates. The setting you can kind of squeeze in, and but you need to tweak it a bit, whatever system you use, I think.
Definitely.
But I think that definitely you can run 5e Greyhawk just perfect. More depending on what play style you have, so to speak. If 5e is the right for your play style.
It also depends on how much. I guess another thing for me was always, how much do you have the DM sort of dictate where the world is going versus how much is it a shared conversation with the players?
Yeah.
And I probably err too much on the former and work towards getting better at the latter. But I think Greyhawk in particular is a great one for the players to be able to contribute as well.
Yeah.
And make it really come alive if you really follow their lead.
I've never left since 1980, and I just I love the setting, which is just so
me too.
wonderful.
I never left the setting. I just changed rule systems.
Yeah, the rules don't really matter.
They don't, exactly.
No, they're kind of a scaffolding. I see them as a scaffolding, as a necessary evil. They need to be there in order to have a game. But the game part is very subdued in the way I play.
So we're not there yet, Gary, on the powers that be. We're gonna deep dive into the specialty priests. Gary's always said, I think Cannon Fire's motto is editions change, Greyhawk endures, which is kind of cool. All right, so 2 quick questions from Canadian Ancient Gamer Patrick. Have you written outside of TSR WotC, and did you on your Drizzt Do'Urden's guide? Did you work with Ari Salvatore on it?
Okay, 2 very different directions. I did do something for Pathfinder in the early days on one of the barbarian tribes. It's been a long time. It was one of the early products. But because I was always a freelancer and had that day job thing, I usually would just pick the things that I enjoyed writing. And so I didn't wander out as far as some others did, because I wasn't always trying to to fill up the whole paycheck. I was more trying to write the stuff that I had enough hours for and that I really enjoyed, which is why, I enjoyed all the writing I did for Greyhawk just on Greytalk and the AOL lists and everything as well, just as much as the stuff that got published. That may seem a little silly since obviously the stuff that got published endured a little better, but for me, it's just about the creative aspect to it. On Drizzt Do'Urden's Guide to the Underdark, that was a really interesting project. I have to admit, when they asked me to do it, the title was kind of terrifying because he's not my character. And I was like, are you sure this is okay? So I even sent Bob a couple emails going like, this isn't going to bother you if I write this book, right? But if you, 2 things to point out is, one, if you notice, I basically use Drizzt as a framing device. It's not really about him. It's written as, supposedly a series of letters to Illustrial, who's a queen on the surface, that he's pulled together to give you this detail. So that's kind of how I accomplished it as a framing device. But at that point, there really wasn't anything other than a few scattered words in various products but not a lot to build off of. So I just kind of took whatever I could find and built off of it. But I have to say, obviously, the whole book is inspired by D1 through 3. I mean, that should be obvious to anybody who looks at it,
Oh,
is that, that was really the first Underdark, right? Not necessarily called that, but, that was the original Underdark that, at that point, what the Realms had was basically the Menza Baranzan box set, right? Which really showed you a Drow city, which was different from, what you saw in D3, but it was still, it was an interesting take on it. But if you looked at the whole getting there, particularly D1 to D2, with the idea of all these little scattered locales and how they link together, that was my inspiration for the whole thing.
so you must be psychic, Eric. Are you ready for this?
All right.
Next Sunday night, I'm going to do this now after he said that. Next Sunday night, everything about Dark Elves. I have D3
cool.
on this, and I have Menza Baranzan box set on there with Ed Greenwood, Tony Winslow Brill, and Eric Mengi, and Anna
Nice.
and me.
I'm going to tune in for that. That
Yes.
sounds fabulous.
So we're gonna butt heads between the two sides there, the Greyhawk Dark Elves and the Forgotten Realms Dark Elves. I'm really excited about this. So wow, that's amazing you brought that up. But that's so cool, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show too. But I just wanted to point out that you said exactly. D3 is my Bible for Greyhawk Dark Elves.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and they're different than Forgotten Realms Dark Elves. D3 Dark Elves aren't dual wielders, all of them. And it seems, it's a lot of craziness going on in that world of. There's a big change, big change, and we'll see.
So that's actually one thing though to point out is though, like if you look at the Vault of the Drow, right, and there's lots of different ways to interpret it, and I've read all sorts of cool takes on it, and people writing, D4 and Q2 and all these, great things I've seen online, but. Fundamentally from the very beginning, you had a they weren't this monolithic culture. It was a rebellious faction, right? It was all through G1 through 3, and later it was integrated into T1 to 4 and A1 to 4 as well. But, there was this whole rebellious heretical faction from the main group. And, that was one of the things that I was trying to do in the Dritz book was, as I was coming up with the cities in that book, I was trying to make sure that each one had a unique culture. And frankly, there is no reason you can't take that whole book, tear it apart, and throw those cities throughout Greyhawk, right? I think 90% of what I wrote would work just fine, if not 95%. But they're like scattered all over the place, and I tried to make every city a little bit different. So, doing the same thing in Greyhawk, if you were trying, one might argue that it's really only in the Southwest that you have, all that Underdark, or you could argue it's the whole continent. And, I could make an argument probably either way. But, if you've got scattered mentions of Mind Flayers or Drow or Dwergar on the surface, I think you need to think through what cultures are going on underneath that are leading up to that surface activity that you see. Right. And then that helps you derive, well, where should there be a city and what should its culture be? There's you've mentioned Polyhedron a couple times. I did an article in Polyhedron on a city called Lurth Durir. I don't know if you ever found that one.
No, but I would love to look it up. And if you can, we have our amazing people online. Guarantee us someone will tell us within the next
they will,
3 to 5 minutes or less.
Give it
where
a
it
couple
is.
minutes. They will find
140, Poly 140.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Poly 140. Awesome.
So that was, that was basically a Drow city that was taken over by Gonadar, the god of oozes, and Gonadar is sort of the realm's equivalent of
the Elder Elemental God.
Yeah, exactly. And so you could take that and you could put that somewhere else in Greyhawk where, Lolth is in the minority and the Elder Elemental God is in the majority in terms of worshipers, and run with it as well.
All right, I'm gonna ask this question for you because Anna and I always butt heads here, right? So Elder Elemental God is not Tharizdun, correct? Yes or no?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elder Elemental God is not Gonadar, but it's a different version. It's Forgotten Realms, right?
Yeah, that one's a little bit funkier. there's so much commonality. Either you say they're just two faces of the same thing,
Okay.
or you say they're rivals with that eventually one will have to conquer the other.
Oh, interesting.
And I think you have to throw, I never pronounce it right, but Jubilex into the mix as well, because there's a lot of overlap there too.
That is an interesting take. Yeah.
All right, here's the $1 million question. Ready, Anna? A Clavdra is behind in Greyhawk and worships which deity? Elder Elemental God or Loth?
Or does she worship either of them?
Or
Okay.
gusts,
Or she just
or whatever.
or
yeah.
she uses them.
She,
Okay.
yeah.
Or
exactly.
she uses them.
I think she's more of a. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see El Clavdra more like using gods rather than worshiping them, so to speak. She's powerful enough that she's more like a diplomat for hire. I see that someone who works for them rather than worshiping them.
I would agree. I think she is so talented that there is she's like that quarterback that everybody hates but has so much talent that anybody would hire in a minute.
Yeah,
I think she's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, go on.
I think she probably pulled herself up on Lolth and then tried to cheat and jump ahead, with the Elder Elemental God. And then when that wasn't working out quite so well, got a little bit back into Lolth's graces, but then maybe went out. Depends on which of the, what order you run the adventures through. Do you view T1 through 4 as coming before or after, right? I mean, there's lots of different ways you could do it. Yeah, I would say she is an opportunist.
Great answer.
And also, if you, I love that. It fits my view of it perfectly. And also, if you read the Gord books, the Gord series from there, she is also involved with Grast, and she's like a herald, and she all sorts of stuff. So it really gives that impression that she's kind of she's a gun for hire in the higher diplomatic circles of the Underdark and the Nether realms and whatnot. So
she always struck me a little bit like Igwelv, maybe a little bit younger.
Yeah.
But that same kind of arc of she's, you remember the articles on the hero deities? Like Merlin and the others. They were back
Merlin, Kellenin,
Yeah, that she might eventually become one of those.
Wow. So we do have one of those. Just so you're aware that very recently, Gary Julian elevated Saint Benedor to demigod status. So we did just have one of those after all these years, which is really cool. And Gary put it in Earth Journal, and I got the specialty priest written up. So a Clavdra would be another perfect one. Has anyone out there done that?
Igvil, Mayaheen, Cuthbert. There are many that kind of, and Cuthbert and Mayaheens are older, but I see that and Igvil was in that category, and I see that El Clavdra it's getting into
I wouldn't take her right
too.
to demigod, but I think a hero deity might be
exactly
really...
on the way into it. She's abandoned, kind of getting past mortality, so to speak, into
a little
like
bit.
Igvil.
And that won't work for everybody, obviously.
No, it's
just
campaign ideas. Yeah,
that's a great idea. I never even considered that. I mean, that's a.
And maybe that's be another way to spin it as well, is that the whole arc was her trying to accomplish that. I mean, it depends on how you want to view what her motivations were. But by leapfrogging back and forth, maybe she's trying to get to that hero deity status.
It is. We have our fundraiser coming up called Underdark Uprising, February 19th to 20th, benefiting St. Jude. We have 9 streams, 8 channels. And I've been trying to, Time Lord's wife, you're playing that St. Benedor priestess. And Gary's on, Pluffett Smedger, if you want to talk to him about it. I was thinking, what great thing can I do for the finale of this? Well, my gosh, a Clavdra attempting to elevate herself in some ceremony or something at the end of that, Anna, what do you think about that? That would be really cool. Just wow, Eric, that's a fantastic idea.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, think of how many, if you think broadly about how many of the demon lords are around her too, right?
Yeah.
You've got Gratz, as you mentioned. You obviously, Lolth, depending on whether you call her a god or a demon lord, right? You've got Zugtamoy with the T1 through 4 is
Yep.
playing around.
And then
You know, if you
Ayus is kind of connected in there.
Ayus, yes.
Yeah.
If you've got the Kingdom of the Ghouls, that
Wolfgangs, yeah.
had written up,
Yeah.
just you know, sort of
Narwhal.
farther out on that D1 to 3 map, right?
Mhm.
And you know, so that might be Yinaw. See, I never pronounced that one right, but so you know, you could bring all those together, and maybe she's doing something where she's actually like assembling a whole coterie of demon lords combined with the elder elemental god to
Yep.
create this ceremony.
Man.
Yep. Yeah, you can spin
All in
that
4
she's
hours.
the mastermind from it, or you
Yep.
can spin it that Gast or some of the demon lords are the mastermind and she's the top henchman. You can spin it one
be
way or
awesome.
the other
And
way.
in fact,
yeah.
if you really wanted to do a Gygax, what you could do, if you want a sequel for next year, is she's trying to bind 9 of the demon lords,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the Vault of the Drow, just
Yep.
like they did under Castle Greyhawk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh.
So there
I'm
are
actually
many.
ready.
You can spin it many different cool ways and make it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So
You would
Make it
like to
great
play in
for
that game,
cliffhanger.
Canadian? Oh my gosh, that would be. Yeah, I'll talk to you, Patrick, off camera, since you are the wonderful. Oh, you know what? I forgot something. I should have done it. So bear with me 1 second here. We do have 2 giveaways tonight, courtesy of one of our followers, viewers, Cannibal Eridar Troy, who is so generous on behalf of Reaper Miniatures, $25 gift certificate, and Troller Games, $25 gift certificate for both. So there'll be 2 of them. Let me set that up real quick. It'll take me 5 seconds here, unless I crash the whole stream. So yeah, don't type that in yet, Rich. Boom, that should have set it up. My bad. I completely forgot there. So we'll get that going, and we'll do that at the end. You got to be on to claim them, unless you ask me if you say, "Hey, I got to go for something." So you know, it's understandable. But there, it's set to go, and everyone can sign up for those giveaways tonight. So I'm really glad I asked you that question, Eric. On man, that's I would have never.
That was
I got to rethink the whole
helped.
finale. I got to rethink the entire thing now. That's really cool.
Yeah, but it's that's dynamite. Yep.
All right.
So that's actually for me a design philosophy is like, and I drive my friend George Crashos nuts with this. So like, you know, it's pretty easy for me to make up names, right? And just say, oh, and we've got this person who does this thing. And to me, that's not as much fun as building off of the scaffolding, you know, where you take, and what I mean by scaffolding is the stuff that's come before. So like, you know, my rule in Greyhawk and also in the Realms was whether it was good or bad, never contradict anything that anybody has previously published.
Yep.
You can minimize it, you can tweak it, you can distort it, but don't ever like just say, I don't care about that. Because if you do that to somebody else, then somebody else is going to do it to you and just ignore what you wrote, right? But if you can try to like take the stuff that exists and think through the logical conclusions of it, it's a lot more fun to kind of work within that constraint system.
Yeah, that's a great rule. Yeah.
And
guideline. Yeah.
That's honoring other authors is great, and it has nothing to do with published sources versus none, because you're running your own campaign, and you got to go with the direction that you want to go and that your players want you to take it, and that's a whole different discussion. But there's so much, and this is one of the reasons why I love. I'm so happy you came on, and others that have come on before and others that come on after. Is man, we get these ideas out there again.
Yeah.
Get some wonderful ideas. All right, I'm gonna dig into the specialty priests here and the deities, because I'm trying to put the timeline together. Polyhedron. I'm gonna put this up. So we have 4 polyhedrons, and Gary put me onto these the powers articles, which I think came out right as Face and Avatars came out. I believe it's right in that time frame.
Yeah, it was right around then. So what was happening was before Face and Avatars came out, I was writing a series for the Realms, Forgotten Deities. And then when they kind of started stealing all that material to, me shoving it at their faces saying, you take this, it's easy. And they put it into Phase and Avatars. I was really hoping that an equivalent book for Greyhawk would come along too. And so that's why I started writing the Powers That Be ones, because I love the Greyhawk Pantheons just as much. And so I wanted to really start flushing out what they would look like and what would make them unique and them different, if that makes sense.
And this is what you put in the very first article. It says habitual Polyhedron magazine readers may see similarities between this column of forgotten deities. Since most of the remaining human powers of Forgotten Realms campaign appeared in Powers and Pantheons, I wanted to expose deities of other worlds and races. Coming issues will reveal powers for the classic World of Greyhawk setting, and then you put due for relaunch in March.
June, it says there. Yeah.
Oh, June. Duh. Listen to me. I can't read. So yeah, but that did not happen? I'm assuming.
The relaunch of Greyhawk. I'm trying to remember how the dates lined up. That might have been when the Carl Sargent stuff was about to come out.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
Because that was later 2E stuff, if I remember. The dates are all blurry.
I know. I know. It's a little bit of a.
But I might have been talking about some of the From the Ashes piece. Trying to remember when From the Ashes came out.
I want to say 90. Everyone help me here. 93? 93.
Yeah, something like that.
So that's before this.
93, then that wouldn't have been it.
Yeah, I believe that's. Yeah. But
all right. I don't remember exactly why that I thought that was true at the time.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was fun to write. I loved it.
Yeah.
So.
And I wished I had done more of them, but I think they got distracted or they threw so many projects at me that I kind of ran out of cycles because I was going through grad school at the same time trying to write a thesis.
It is, well, I can imagine with real life, you really packed a huge amount of detail in here. And some of the things I wanted to ask you before I share these, okay, because I'm going to hold this off because I'm, a jerk like that. Baca, and all there's 4 articles in there. All right. Face and Avatars.
Yep.
Who decided what deities went in here? Was that you or was that someone else?
So it was somewhat space count. So I had kind of put together the list of all the deities, and I would put them in sort of 3 general buckets. There were a bunch of deities that were mentioned in the original Grey Box set, and in fact, if you really want to look at the history, and you can ask Ed about this if you have him on, there's an article back in Dragon 54 where Ed actually lays out how to build a pantheon for your campaign world if you're building your own campaign world. And so, but for these books, we basically started with the ones that the Grey Box had. Okay. And the added complication here was they had clearly blown up the Pantheon. So, remember the Forgotten Realms came out as first edition, and second edition came out not like 5 years later, but like 1 or 2 years later. And so they had decided as an editorial decision to do the Avatar Crisis, kill off some of their best gods and bring in some new ones. And so by the time we did all the dead ones and the living ones and the main ones measured, we could barely fit them all in the book. Right. But I had a whole list of all the ones where Ed had said something like, oh, there's a god named Abrandal, and that was like 1 sentence. Or there's a god named Seth, and that was 1 sentence. And so I was keeping that list, and I was basically building the second book as we went. Okay,
and that's Powers and Pantheons, which I love.
That's Powers and Pantheons.
I love because I've stolen deities and put them in my campaign. And we'll go over.
And some of them you just file them off. I mean, like I'm not going to say Lathander and Pelor are the same thing, but if you haven't written up Pelor, just steal the Lathander right up and put it in there.
So here's one. I use Helm spells for Mayheen in my campaign.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So and Lathander, False Dawn, and Sunrise are great spells for Lathander. Pelor, Foltus, have them in my campaign because
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense.
You have, I know, and here's some weird things. There's deities and demigods, finished deities in here. Ilmater, one of my favorites of all time, Leviator. Myliki.
Yep.
Right. So they're not made from scratch. Some of these, and was that just was that the Forgotten Realms?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like if you go back and you read Dragon 54,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So Ed in there talks about how he pulls the pantheon together. And you got to remember at that point, what we had published was Deities and Demigods, the first edition one, that laid all out all the earth pantheons, right? And so what Ed did is he took a mixture of those deities, grab one here, and made up a whole bunch of his own. And then, Jeff Grubb had a big hand. This is my best understanding, so if I'm wrong, my fault, not theirs. But then Jeff Grubb had a hand as well. There's some deities like Joaquin, the goddess of trade, I think was his, and a few others, maybe Valkyr, I think. And so,
Okay.
you've got that's how that pantheon was built. So if you go back and look in the gray box set, the gods that they list, it's pretty close to the table of contents and faiths and avatars. There might be a few that are off, but just because Ilmater came from the Finnish pantheon doesn't mean that we were saying the Finnish pantheon was in the realms,
Right.
or
Okay.
that we were going for that. And in fact, if you read I don't know enough about the actual Finnish pantheon, but as presented in the Deities and Demigods, the Ilmater that's in there is actually fairly different from the one that the realms has. So you can kind of see that evolution. Whereas Greyhawk, was all, I believe every Greyhawk deity did not appear in Deities and Demigods, right? They're
No,
all
not
unique.
even close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them are a lot more written up than some of the others are. There's some really obscure names on that list. But yeah, so it's just different ways of doing it. And in fact, we talked about this earlier, but I was saying one of the differences, between Greyhawk and the Realms is that Realms is sort of later on, and the cultures have merged and the pantheons have merged, whereas in Greyhawk, the cultures are still fairly distinct and the pantheons are definitely distinct. And that can really, I've actually found myself trying to tease apart some of the Realms pantheon to figure out, well, what were the proto pantheons that came before, right?
Oh
And you
wow.
could do the same thing in Greyhawk as well. Like if you talk through, the Iridians conquered this other, we know the basic cultures, but that doesn't mean there couldn't have been additional ones.
Yeah.
And they may well have absorbed some of the deities from those pre-cultures, even before the Sul and the Iridians came through.
So we rest his soul. Leonard was on the show like 40 times, and we really went through the soul deities with him like crazy, and it was just such a wonderful thing. But yeah, that would be pretty neat to check for someone to do that, because we have Iridian and Soul paralleling them in some areas like Keeland, and then just in other areas just warring, and then you have the Flan intermixing, and it just definitely pretty.
So the Flan to me would be the one that I would probably break up and say, so before you had all these waves of conquest, right? Rather than view them as a monolithic culture that spread across all of Eastern Orc, as I would say, well, where were their regional bases, and how did each regional base differ from some of the others? And did they just emphasize different gods, or did they actually have different sub-pantheons that came together to be the Flan pantheon over time? And that might, tell you where to put, certain obscure old temples that are 1,000 years old that no one has any idea what they're about.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And you can also have that the Flan was influenced by the Origians and the Sul coming in. So that changed the Flan faith more as a response, so to speak.
Yes.
So that might have united those Flans that was actually there because they were seeing each other as enemies or competitors or adversaries. And then when the others came in, they kind of unified a little bit more, and you get more
right,
of
yeah, because they were getting overwhelmed. Let's at least work together to get the invaders out. Yeah.
So
then we can fight later.
Yeah, exactly. And then
like
so that way that created in some way that's an argument you can make that might have made Flan culture more coherent, what was left, so to speak.
Yep. No, I think that would be great. And I think there was I don't know if it was in an Orth journal. I'm trying to remember where I was reading. It was really nicely done about the Flan I think it was, some of the proto
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
early cultures and the like. So that's the kind of stuff that I really dig. And I also really like the, the variance of a faith and what the heresies are like.
Yeah. And
Um,
oh, sorry, go on.
No.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say the Earthland, you can take it at back as animalistic, and they could worship more like a lot of humanoids and others doing today, so to speak. That was I
Mhm.
can see it like a time before advanced religions and stuff. It was more kind of basic faiths or basic they were cults, so to speak.
Yeah.
Back in the day, so to speak, and that's where you can say that that's where Nerul and a bunch of others come from, so to speak, from that time, and then they survived and kind of merged into more modern gods that are worshipped in different ways by people to this day. So yeah.
And that one way to start hinting at that is if you reveal that a god like Nerul has alternate names,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right? Then the question is, well, where did those names come from? And
Yep.
they usually came from cultural amalgamation of two different gods, is my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. And
Yep.
so the winner sort of vacuums up all the names
Yep.
that all the things that he subsumed or she subsumed
Mm-hmm.
into one kind of faith. But then
Yep.
they still preserve the names so that no one can kind of sneak in at the margins and steal the worshipers back away.
Yep.
My question on deities to you, as this discussion goes on, which is unbelievably intriguing and just so deep as far as thought goes, because you seem to know. I mean, you've really thought out all this, and it's just I just scratched the surface, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, wow, this, and it's fantastic, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Who came
Yep.
up with the idea? Each priest has got to have the spheres, and that'll change the spell lists up.
Yeah.
Who was the first that said we should do this?
Now I'm racking my brain.
I'm sorry, that's a tough one, but I was
Was
wondering.
this
I thought second edition had the concept of a specialty priest in it.
Mhm.
It
Am I
did,
wrong?
it did, but
Like the base, like the player's handbook had a specialty priest or not?
it did, but it did just it didn't go into as much depth as you do in the Face and Avatars book,
Yeah, so we definitely ran with it. I was just saying I didn't want to claim credit for the idea of a specialty priest. I'm pretty sure that came out of the the second edition player's handbook, although I'd have to go
player's
back and
options where they go over how to make one, and the player's option rules, that one of the supplemental books.
Yeah, but that came later, and I think there was some concept of a specialty priest before that. But basically, the idea was, it goes back to I don't ever want to see somebody playing a cleric in chainmail with a mace going cure light wounds.
Yeah, it's kind of boring,
you know what I mean? It's just I found that so dull. And so, once if you start with a god name and then you say, well, what's their portfolio? Immediately you're like, well, if my god is the god of trees, why can't I do druid stuff? Right?
Yeah.
Or if my god is the god of rocks, why can't I do earth elemental stuff? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thought you have as soon as somebody tells you what your god is the god of. And then to me, it all kind of falls out from there. Third edition is prestige classes, fifth edition, it's, whatever. But I didn't mean that in a dismissive way. I just mean like every rule set has some way of doing it. It's just, I think once you sort of have that sense, like, well, what weapon does my god wield? Well, he wields a scythe. Well, then I should wield a scythe, right? Why should I be limited to a mace if I'm worshiping the god of swords? That's just dumb, so that it's that kind of like, I think the player saying, well, why can't I be more like my god? That drives you in that direction. And so then we just tried to do the logical things, of take whatever that portfolio was and take it to its logical conclusion. That's how I think you build a specialty priest, is you don't worry about like, is this going to be perfect for a D&D party? You say, I'm playing an NPC who wants my god to rule the world. How should I do that?
Yeah. And I see druid as a specialty priest, meaning that's a specialty priest of in my Greyhound campaign, I have the old faith, meaning that nature and stuff. So that's a specialty priest. And I want to,
it is really the first specialty priest.
Yeah. And I want the other ones to have similarly specialized priesthoods, and in some ways they can have several different. They can be the cloistered one who sit in and do the sermons in the temple, and then you can have adventuring ones. So you can have ones that are the guardians in order, that is a guardian of the faith or the faithful or whatever, or an evil one that go out and bash and kill the opposite ones, that the worshippers of some other religion, and the ones that guards the flock, and so you can have variant classes or archetypes or whatever you call them that functions different in religion too, and then you can have specialty paladins like champions that are functioning different for each religion. So
absolutely,
so as a now that
and also I think across different sects. So once you write your Faiths and Avatars book for your campaign setting, right, the next thing you should do is blow it up. And what I mean by that is, like, Bastion of the Faith has the write-up of Heronius and Hexter, right? They're two very crisply opposed faiths. They're kind of mirror images of each other, and they're a yin and a yang, and they're very much, you can see how they play with each other. And so to me, the interesting thing to do is to say, well, what about a sect that's trying to reunite them into the Uber God, right? They're not lawful good, they're not lawful evil, they're lawful neutral. Or maybe they're lawful evil because they're so wacko that what they're doing is nuts, but that's their stated purpose, and they hate both faiths because they're keeping them apart. And so their whole thing is to tear down the barriers between the two faiths, which could mean raiding both temples. You can take an idea like that and then just take it to its logical conclusion.
And you can take the Foltest ones. You can take the old Foltest that was kind of good, that was part of the Great Kingdom, and then you had the Palites that was kind of neutral, going wacko almost, became fervor and so on. And you can see the schism between. You can have Foltians in Ireland or Foltians in what was left over from Great Kingdom having religious wars almost, or debates or whatever, and seeing the Palites. And then you have Dimri, the ones that are even more extreme than the Palites. and so there you have the sects, and you can have, if you want to have religion going nuts, there is a perfect example in Greyhawk.
I have them in the Shieldlands.
Half-spelled. So you
have and then you just drop a relic in, and the god says, the leader of my faith should hold this relic. And drops it into the wilderness, and all three faiths or all three sects are going after it.
And then you can have different ones. Some religions are very like only male do this or female do that. And some of the other ones are completely unisex. Everybody do whatever roles. And that could be cultural wars between them or antagonism and stuff. And so I've made the shield dance into, I wanted to see, because we have so many evil cults in Greyhawk and in Adventures. I was like, what is a good cult? How is that working? And looking. So I wanted, after the wars now, the Shieldlanders have gone hardcore, so to speak. So I wanted to see what would good cult be. So that's why I tried to mold the Knights of the Holy Shielding into a religious fervor good cult, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. That's great. I think good cults are good. They're interesting. There's a lot of interesting things you can do. The other thing I was going to say, though, is one of the things I've run into a lot as a problem is, so I love the old Roger Moore articles when he first laid out the different pantheons. But one of the hard things about those pantheons is they're kind of monocultures alignment wise. So like you look at the elf pantheon, and they're, they range all the way from chaotic neutral to chaotic good. Right. And what if you want to play a lawful evil elf cleric? What is a culturally appropriate deity for you to worship that's not like adopting a human deity? And you can tease out some interesting cults and sects doing that as well. Like you take one aspect of a chaotic good god and take it to its logical conclusion, and now you've got a chaotic evil heretical sect, or a lawful good one, which is also problematic, right? You can do stuff like that as well to make those pantheons more diverse, and therefore those cultures more diverse and more.
I can imagine. I've flirted with the idea of I know it's there. I want it there in my campaign, but I haven't detailed it yet. And have like an underground elven counterculture to the established one, because they're chaotic predominantly after all. So it's there, but it's under the surface, so to speak, and more kind of a dark fae kind of religion that some of them do, and that's where the banshees and stuff come into play. And
that's perfect. perfect. But I've also gone with like Elven Cults of Zugtamoy, right? Because they're
See?
all about
Yep.
nature,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them
Wow.
say, well, we need the full cycle of
Yep.
life, which includes rotting and renewal.
Yep.
And so now you've got your gateway fungus into a church of Zugtamoy that makes perfect sense as an underground sect in Selene or wherever. You know what I mean? You can do stuff.
So you have it. It's not mainstay
That's
and it's
cool
not
idea.
politically correct, so to speak, within the
Mhm.
Elven realm, and they're shunned, but they are there, so to speak. And
and maybe maybe people don't even talk about it, like the elves don't talk about it, but they actually all know it's there, and they're
exactly.
not that opposed to it because they see it as part of the cycle of life.
Exactly, and it's also like it's a way to get rid of the ones we don't like. They automatically congregate over there. It's always better to keep your enemies close than somewhere else. And I did the same thing with the Flan. I took it that Horned Society has its root back in the Flan days with Nerul and stuff. And those were the people that were so bad that didn't fit in society. Instead of locking them in the prisons or whatever, they simply had sort of a deal. You can live over there and do whatever you want as long as you don't mess with us. But they also knew that if someone came and messed with the Flan as a whole, these evil bastards living over there could actually be useful for each other, so to speak. So they could kind of gang up, and that's how the Horned ones got their start, so to speak. And then that morphed into, when there were other invaders coming, it more formalized and morphed over time into the Horned Society. So the Horned ones are something that goes back thousands of years, and then they kind of abandoned their because when 10 fell and Horned Society didn't do anything, that was the ultimate betrayal to their original purpose, so to speak.
Which maybe would lead to a restarting of like, let's go back to our roots and start it over again. Not like, power hungry modern folk, but go back to the ancient rituals that aren't necessarily
That's
that
exactly
evil.
one of my points in my campaign, because I put
like
that in there. So I put that in there as one of the happenings in my campaign.
It's great how you can just the idea is you can go off on a tangent and just run with it. It's your campaign and do whatever you so choose, and that's a lot of
also, Eric, what do you say? You build on what's there, and you take seeds from that, and don't try to contradict them. You build on them, so to speak. I love
to
that
me
approach.
It's more fun because I can take a piece of paper and just write on it and start from scratch, but then there's no constraint system, and so it's actually more fun to get more complicated stories as you try to explain the constraint system with whatever tweak you've thrown into it. It's always good to put your own tweak in it, but
and it was like when Carl Sargent killed off the Horned Society, and it was like one of my favorite villains, and he's gone. They're gone. But I decided to work around it, so to speak, and now I realized it can actually be more fun, because now I have something that is kind of gone underground, and you have to twist it and have to kind of bring it back some creative way back into the story again.
I love it.
So wow, great discussion so far. I'm going to ask you a question about the back appendices of this. There's a class in here that I really like. It's only half a column, and it fills a hole for us, and that is hopefully I can show it to you. That's the Crusader. Yours or?
Nope. That one was, I think, Julia. That one and the Mystic, I think, were Julia's.
Okay.
But I the Crusader in particular resonated with me.
Okay.
And I tried to really integrate them all through the book as much as I could, because that this goes back to the every edition has done it differently. What is a paladin? Is a paladin only lawful good, or is a paladin a champion of the faith, right? And D&D players have been having that debate since first edition, right? I think it was Dragon 39, if I remember right, had the anti-paladin in it. I remember that coming out. I was like, ooh, this is making me think differently, because once you have one, then you have all these. So to me, the Crusader was a nice way to say, putting aside the paladin wars of whether or not paladins can only be lawful good or not, it does make sense that every faith has their own champions that are a little bit more martial, that are not serving as the clerical leaders of the faith, but are really the martial leaders of the faith that make sure the faith doesn't get overrun or does the conquest. And that class is perfect for it. So you'll notice that class is all over the place. Whereas the mystic class, which I think is in there as well, is also a neat class, but it doesn't fit as well with as many faiths. And so you only see it mentioned a few times throughout the book.
Yeah, the Crusader basically is diametric alignments for the most part. You know,
Yep.
LG, CG, you know, CE, and
but yeah, it's a good way to take your philosophical beliefs and put a martial spin on it, take it to its logical conclusion. In some sense, it's going to sound like heresy, but in some sense, it would have been more interesting to not have the Paladin and to only have the Crusader.
Oh.
Right? I mean, that would you could certainly run a game world like that.
Yeah, absolutely. To consider it back then, and what's good is it's based off a specialty priest, but it's basically they fight on the fighter table, they save on the cleric table. It's almost like a fighter cleric hybrid, but it's not because you know I gave them weapon specialization, just like they did the second edition, because I think that they're on that level of paladins, you know, but not extra attacks. It's a great mix of a class that you can say whatever a Tritherian Crusader. Chaotic good. Perfect.
Yeah, right? that's the perfect class. That's the example. You could also do Foltis as another perfect example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's up, Gallagher? And on the chaotic evil side, there's no reason you can't have an I use one. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Pathfinder 2, they made a champion class, the base class, and then you have different archetypes for different alignments or religions and stuff. So the lawful good is the paladin version of it, and then they made 3 different good ones examples, and then you can have evil ones and everything in between.
Yeah, I almost you know, if I was I always tend to do more the lore than the rules, but if I was really gonna dig into it, I would probably think about taking the Crusader ideas, the monk ideas, and the paladin ideas, and seeing if you can bring them to, not in an overpowered way, but because, you know, the monk is essentially almost like a specialty Crusader that's non-weapon, at least the way it's written up a lot of the time. And so, you know, I always thought it was a little bit weird to make that a separate class, as opposed to saying, look, there's, you know, you should be able to specialize in almost any attack form that matches your deity, including unarmed combat if that's what your deity wants you to do. Right. But not every deity should push you that way. And so I would actually like to kind of bring all 3 classes together, find the best of them, and then make it possible to play any alignment with them as a religious champion, I guess is what I would call it.
And it is good to have options for your players for variety and for flavor, and that's why when I went through that book and I'm like, I'm stealing this. I don't care if this isn't Forgotten Realms book. This class exists in my campaign now, and we have a lot of our players have taken advantage of that over the years. You know, to have Crusader.
And hopefully steal a lot of the specialty priests too, because they're just different classes. You can get a lot of variety with them.
And that's next question here. So this book, what you say is like Ed Greenwood mentions one thing and you decided to put it in here. Well, we have Bill, if you're on, Sashar Scorn and I, we have an all-time favorite in here.
Okay.
And we're thinking there's something missing in the Greyhawk deities, and that is a god of battle strategy. Hence the Red Knight.
Yep.
Could you tell me the origins of that deity?
There was a 1-sentence mention in the 2nd edition campaign setting of her.
Okay.
Literally, that's all there was. And so, you know, I had this image of the chessboard or lance board, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, the key thing for the realms, the war god is chaotic
Tempest.
Neutral.
Yeah, Tempest, yeah.
Right? But by making him chaotic neutral as opposed to neutral, you're saying something. Right? Yeah. And so there's actually 3 war gods in the Faerunian pantheon. There's Tempest, who's like your classic war god, but again, chaotic neutral, not neutral. And then there's Garagos, who's like venturing into chaotic evil territory. He's more that berserker, uncontrolled battle rage. And so there needed to be a balance. The way I thought about it was there needed to be a balance to that Garagos character, who's on the cover, by the way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, he's the 6-arm. So if you actually look at that painting, which I love, I actually own the original of it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a 6-armed war god walking through a sea of blood with skeletons.
There we have your Hextor.
Yes, it could be a Hextor, exactly.
Yeah.
So my idea for the Red Knight was to really make that the counterweight to that uncontrolled battle fury. It's the controlled battle fury. The best analogy is in the Orc Pantheon. You've got Grumsh, who's kind of the Tempest, and you've got Bagtru, who's like kind of the Garagos, right? The uncontrolled savage. And then you have Ilnaville, who's the god of strategy, right? So she's sort of playing that same role. And I absolutely think if you've got, a really well-disciplined knightly order that is about executing the king's commands as opposed to doing their thing for their own purposes, they're almost more, it's almost like the god of generals, right? So I could easily see it being tightly aligned to the kingdom of Keeland back at its height or something like that. Or the Great Kingdom, if you wanted.
And I always thought that, and I know there's a third brother who's dead, right? But you had lawful good, Heronius, lawful evil, Hextor, and there was nothing in between. And this filled that for us, and it just seemed to be perfect in the campaign. And it actually has a following amongst a lot of the player characters now that they, when they want to go to that battle strategy, knights move. There's all sorts of cool spells, for this deity.
I love chess. I'm a big chess player.
Yeah. So you created the spells. You created the spells for Red Knight.
Yeah.
And most of the spells.
So that book, I basically wrote the whole thing. Ed helped me here and there with little bits of it. But whereas the other one, the three of us were writing equally, this one was pretty much all me with a little bit of help.
So there's a supplemental, and it's orange covered, called Prayers from the Faithful, and there's more Red Knight spells than that. Is that you're doing in those? A lot of your spells make it into Prayers from the Faithful as well?
Nope. That was was Ed writing that. So Ed, if you remember, had written the Pages from the Mages articles in Dragon,
and that's
this is before the Wizards 3 articles. This is back the pre-100 era.
Okay.
So this is before the Realms was published. So he wrote all these great spell books that had all these little tidbits of lore, and then followed by some really unusual spells. And so that had been turned into FOR8, which was called Pages from the Mages, and printed those Dragon articles.
Okay.
And Prayers from the Faithful is essentially the clerical equivalent to that.
Okay.
Now it's a little bit strange, of course, because none of the editions has had a concept of restricting spells to certain faiths, other than specialty priests and 2e, right? But they keep going back and saying, well, you can cast anything off the cleric list. Is sort of like every edition goes back to that. And I actually think that takes a lot of the flavor away from it.
Yes.
I much prefer to restrict the spell lists on a per faith basis. So like in 3rd edition, they have like the generic spell list, and then they have the domains. I haven't actually run a campaign this way, but I'm really tempted to only let give the cleric 5 domains, but they can only cast out of their domains. You could do the same thing with specialty priests, is essentially take the spells we have in those books, add in the ones that are appropriate out of the player's handbook, and say, this is your limited spell selection. If you want more, you need to go find old scrolls that reveal your deity's teachings.
Eric, I will share my spell lists of all 42 deities.
I would love to see
that. For example, and there's some handwritten notes because I'm always adding some here and there. Here is Leviatar, which is in my campaign as one of my evil deities, and all the levels and spells. She also has the spells from your first book, and then there were Prayers from the Faithful as well. Body Blade, Sacred Strike, Loving Pain, and Wailing Whips are all from that person that I was like, like I said,
They
I
all
will
make
take,
sense.
I'll take from Forgotten Realms,
Yeah.
and only Priests of Leviator are gonna cast that, and of course they're NPCs only in my game, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is such a. I'm so happy to hear that
Yeah,
that
this
thought
is
process is the same.
yeah, it's a wonderful.
Yeah, I
It's
gotta ask
amazing.
this one before we get to some crowd questions. Back to the original discussion on sages. You said that you wrote Heronius and Hexter in this book. Is that correct? You did the
Yep.
specialty priests.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. They're
Yeah.
wonderful. No,
Oh yeah,
seriously,
that
they're
fantastic. Yep.
wonderful.
Yep.
It
What
is great.
That was a fun product to work on because Heronius and Hexter are such mirrors of each other. You really can take the whole book and make it a good space or a completely evil space. And so it was like, I just have to write these gods up. So it was just so much fun to write those.
It is, and like there's more spells for Heronius in here, which is okay because you're going to be a player character. If you're a player character of Hexter, it's a little, but you got you went up to 7th level spells, miracles in here. It's almost like a wish, Call Templars. There's some fantastic Bolt of Glory. And all the abilities, everyone is in here. It's a prototype on how to build both for Heronius and Hexter, your specialty priests. And Hexter's in the back, the Battle Scourges. Wonderful stuff.
As much as we all play Heronius, I actually really like Hexter. I think the idea of the 6 arms or something about it really gets me.
Battle arms.
But,
yeah.
You can do so much with that.
We turned it into, there's a lawful neutral aspect allowed in some circumstances. So we do have that in our campaign, but it's got to be right on that border as you're a hired gun mercenary type that's out, and that's where we are with Hexter, because we had a character use battle arms in a recent fight, a multi-class. And they can have as many as 4 extra arms, so they'll have 6 arms fighting at 10th level or whatever. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, you can go nuts with that. It really lets you go the multi-attack route. The other thought I had once, but I never actually wrote up, was that, because I like to come up with heretical sects, is for Hexter with the 6 arms, that's kind of insectoid, right?
Okay.
As that you could, this is going a very different way than how you would normally portray the faith, but you could do something with him where they kind of collapse him in with a veneration of like a 6-armed insect, or and maybe some of the hierarchical ones like ants or whatever, or they're just different things that you could maybe come up with a heretical sect around, where Hexter is actually more of a god of vermin, with a hive mind and a colony that he's trying to take over for that kind of reason. A little more Borg-like, for lack of a better word.
Very cool. I love the thought on for veering off and coming up with your own ideas. Yeah, try Thrykeen Hexter. You never know, man. Sure, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Your third book, Demi-Human Deities. Did you take on Roger Moore's articles and say, I'm going to run with this and go crazy with it? Is that what?
Pretty much.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Roger Moore had written so it's really hard to say just how difficult it is to do something like what Roger had done, right? Because he was starting from literally nothing. And, every week he had to come up with 4 or 5 gods, or every month he had come up with like 4 or 5 gods for a race that had no culture whatsoever. And he's essentially kind of coming up with the culture. And so the actual write-ups are pretty darn short, but they gave you just enough of a nub of an idea to run with it. And then every place that I could find an additional one mentioned in like 2 lines, I would blow up and do as well. So like,
beautiful.
For the Grey Dwarves, the Dwergar, Ladiguar had been, I forget where he first showed up. If it was, I don't think he was in the Roger Moore articles. I think he was in Sargent's Monstrous Mythology. I don't remember where he first showed up, but that was kind of monolithic to have one god for an entire subrace. And so I found a 1-line mention in a Forgotten Realms thing about Deep Dwera. And like, all right, now we're gonna make her another gray dwarf god. And you can take a different aspect, because like one of the cool things about the Dwergar were their psionics, and it's like, well, then clearly they need a god of gray dwarf psionics to go in that direction, right? And so when you find an aspect to one of these cultures, there probably ought to be a corresponding idea there that you can go with. I don't know if folks actually know, but in the third edition books like Frostburn, and I know Frostburn, I think Sandstorm as well, they have a section on gods that, well, first of all, in third edition, the generic was Greyhawk, right? So nominally it was part of Greyhawk as well. But they actually have some new gods in there as well. That like they'll mention Oral from the Realms, they'll mention the equivalent from Greyhawk, but then they'll come up with a couple new ones as well. So if you need more flushing out of your pantheon, some of those generic third edition books actually had a few more deity ideas that you could say were Greyhawk gods.
You like
as
Sword
well,
and Fist, and or those?
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
some, and they had some prestige classes that could be back converted to.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
So there's lots to work with.
Did you create any of these in this demi-human deities from scratch?
Yes and no. I
Okay.
mean, what I mean by that is
Like Zandalar, which is
One
an
line
aspect of
mention.
Shar-S, isn't it? Correct?
Yes. So all right, so that's an interesting one. So there was a one-line mention of that. Now, sometimes I was fighting page counts, I'll be honest about that.
Okay.
And so Zandalar could have been broken out separately, but I came up with a way to link her into Shar-S, so I didn't have to do a separate write-up.
Okay.
So it's not that I can't invent them, but to me it was always more fun to take on what existed and build on it. So if I could find a literally one sentence description of a deity that had never had anything done with it again, I would rather run with that than just make one up. So for instance, I think, if I'm remembering right, because I think it got listed in later books, but at the time when N1 came out, Cult of the Reptile God.
Yep.
There was a reference to, I'm going to mispronounce it, Marilka, who is a goddess of agriculture.
Yep.
And there wasn't really a good god or goddess in that role at that time. And so that's the kind of thing for me, rather than make up a god of agriculture, if I can find a one-line reference in some obscure product and then turn it into a whole thing, that was just much more fun for me. So every single god in demi-human deities, I found at least one obscure reference to before I built it up, but most of them were literally one sentence.
Were there those references in the Gord novels at all? I'm not sure about that. Was there some that that were?
I read all the Gord novels, but I was pretty careful not to build off of that, because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to in the published material that I was doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was mostly going with the powers that be, my intent was to go through some of the obscure Greyhawk ones, although I didn't obviously finish it. But I was mostly going with the obscure Realms references in the Realms books, obviously. If I had been doing one for Greyhawk, I certainly would have pulled anything out of Gord that I would have been allowed to, but I would have had to ask if that was allowed at the time or not, because there were weird politics about it, obviously.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the powers that be, shall we? So,
Sure.
So we start with the first one, and they're scrolling through. So, but I because of XSplit with their non-flash usage anymore, I'm just going to throw them up. The first one that you did was Baka.
Yep.
Lord of all mages. So, and the specialty priests are in here.
Yes.
The powers beyond, and has foes, has the whole thing. Bakab the Uncaring, and this is kind of, there's some great like sub references in here. There may be items, or maybe spells, or maybe some or special abilities for priests. And there's one on the next one that I missed in my priest class, which I added it in this afternoon. So Bakab's the first one, really cool. The Uncaring, not, that's a weird one because the true neutrality. So a lot of player characters are hesitant, but I don't think that really matters as far as if you're just a worshiper. What do you think about that?
So I mean, there's a bunch of different ways. I mean, the Realms has obviously struggled with Maestra, and every edition has done something to blow up Maestra,
Yeah.
which I think is a little unfortunate. I'm kind of I've always liked the consistency of the Greyhawk deities, and Bokob is both the uncaring, but he's also the Lord of all the magics, right? And so the question is what is the relationship to magic versus to wizards? And in some sense the dichotomy between Maestra and Azuth in the Realms is similar to what you see between Bokob and Zagig in Greyhawk, although it's a really different dynamic. So why are you worshiping the magic? Are you worshiping magic because it's all powerful, just as an end in itself, or are you trying to accomplish something? And I think Bokob would allow you to do either, but probably is a little bit more towards the uncaring title is he's all about the magic because of the magic. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so to me, that was always a really interesting one. There's been some interesting hybrid cleric mage kind of classes that I think would be really perfect for Bokob as where you would want to go with that is someone who's able to tap into the arcane and the divine spells.
Very cool. Second one, St. Cuthbert. And
Yeah,
this
old
is
favorite.
Yeah.
this is the one where I missed that. You got some granted powers in here that I do not have in my list, so which is cool. So definitely,
Well, St. Cuthbert is pretty unique. I think there's not really a good equivalence in a lot of in other campaign settings, and yet he's really the perfect kind of character for that adventuring party. If you told me nothing about your campaign and said, you're playing the cleric, right? My first choice would probably be St. Cuthbert, just because it's easy to come up with a story of why he's out on the road bashing monsters over the head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But and he is basically pretty good, but he's not paladin-esque, I guess is the way I would
right. It's
put
more
it.
lawful neutral and lawful good. It seems like.
Yeah, he's more practical and down to earth to
Practical.
me.
That's
Yeah.
good way to say it.
Yeah. He's a sort of a cleric of the common people, which then allows you to walk into, I could role play walking into the village and saying, well, while we're here buying supplies, I'd like to convert you all, right? That's easy if you're a priest of St. Cuthbert.
Yeah. I see it at Cuthbert as the kind of the opposite from Rao. That seems to be the god of diplomacy and the learned and really the high end of stuff. The people that were supposed to rule and wisely and so on. And then Cuthbert being the god of every and also that they're kind of active in the same area. I see that as a kind of a they take in different parts of the market, so to speak, of worshippers. So
yes, yeah, St. Cuthbert's the one who's down, not necessarily in the slums, but at least in the lower middle class kind of.
Exactly, the common folks there. Yeah.
Yeah, and he probably has more influence in the long run than Rao does.
Yeah.
Even though Rao is influencing the kings. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
the high and mighty and yep.
Yep. So no, he was always a favorite of mine, so I couldn't not write him up.
Oh, that's great.
Excellent.
Yep.
And third one is Procan.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I really wanted to. I'm trying to remember. I think maybe they said something about a sea theme. It's been a long time since I remember, though.
Right.
So that might have influenced it a little bit, which one that I did, because there, having started so early, that one was, a pretty obvious one to get to eventually, and it was just sort of like, when should you do it? But yeah, no, I mean, at the time, I thought the relationship with the four wind gods was pretty cool. And, there were just so many relationships to the other deities that I thought it's sort of like, what you were talking about, like the school deities and how Leonard had sort of built them all up and done those articles on them and everything. That there are certain clusters of deities that really you need to understand them in context with each other. And to me, so Procan was sort of the root of a whole set of gods that we knew almost nothing about. And so once you kind of understand Procan, then you can write up, Atroa, Satilian, Telcher, and Wenta as, sort of almost aspects or subordinate to, sort of like the relationship of the Red Knight to Tempest. You have that same sort of relationship going on. I mentioned earlier, this is for the realms, but I think you could apply it to Greyhawk. So that I had been reverse engineering what the pantheons were. And so in the realms, they have this thing called the Gods of Fury, where you have Talos, the Stormlord, and he's served by Umberlee and Malar, the Beast Lord, and Auril, the Frost Maiden. And so it's all these gods of storms and everything. So I came up with this pantheon idea that the Ruathan pantheon was this group of seafarers who all they had were hero deities on the good side, and all the evil deities were greater gods. And so the hero deities die about once every 500 to 1,000 years and get replaced by another hero deity who fits the archetype. So there's the stalker, the hunter, the sailor.
Oh, interesting.
And so you rotate through multiple gods, and then you have these archetype gods who they're kind of like going up against. And so I actually had that idea first when I was doing this article around Procan, was sort of like, yes, he's an Ewerdian god, but it might have been a subculture that was really focused on the sea, right? And so could you have had a sub-pantheon that's really about him and the other wind gods, right? And and maybe those wind gods were hero deities that were sailing over the seas, or, claiming control of different directions, and where was their central island that they were radiating out from. There was a bunch of stuff you could have done around that, where you can tell I like the hero deity concept, where you have these above average, humans trying to reach hero status, and you either have neutral uncaring gods or evil gods that they're going up against, more like Hercules kind of, or the Odyssey, that kind of thing.
Or what's it? I said it right? Lemminkainen from Finnish deities, right?
Yes, yeah, that's another one.
Yeah,
Or
Vanamoinen.
going up against
Yeah.
the Titans kind of thing,
Yeah.
where the gods are bad and the heroes are doing the best they can. So it's just a thought that you could go with this. Either the gods are uncaring or they're evil.
Well, you mentioned another one that I stole, and that's Talos. I made him the Stormlord. I just love the idea, and chaotic neutral and bad storms, and just fits in. I wasn't a Telcher kind of person, so I threw in that one as well in that discussion. But haven't used Procan, but it's a really great write up. So I may look into adding that one in. But the last one is Corel of that. The Bitter Hand.
Oh,
the
right. Yeah, I remember doing that.
Yeah,
one.
Corel. Really interesting.
Yeah, that was not one that had much to build on at all. And those are actually the ones that I like the most, is the ones where I can actually, it feels like I'm not just spending most of my work just restating it in the newest edition terms, if that makes sense.
Right.
But actually trying to take it a little bit further. And I don't know, it was just this whole portfolio around jealousy, revenge, and thievery. Why would anybody worship that, right? And why is that even a god, right? And take that to its sort of logical extreme. So I linked him in with Zilchus and Atroa and Sotilian. So I tried to there was that big long table of deities and which pantheon they were in and what their alignment was. And, I looked for each one of them at what their portfolio was. And I looked for either overlaps or opposites. And then you can start weaving a story in between those guideposts, for lack of a better word. So there really wasn't much. It's like one line on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then you can build it off what's logical from that. So that one was one of the most fun, just because, unlike St. Cuthbert, which had already had a dragon article and everything else, this one was really a fun new direction to go.
I love how you call specialty priests coveters.
Coming up with especially priest names was always fun.
Yeah, that is good. And man, this Corel has a large foe list. Oh my gosh, a lot of deities don't like Corel, and
Well, it fits with the portfolio, right?
Yeah.
If you're
But
gonna be in the revenge business, you need a lot of enemies.
but think of these. The three allies are really don't Jormy, which is really a good deity, Ralishaz, which is perfect, and Tritherian.
Well,
Nice
they're
mix.
kind of colleagues in a way, in in the revenge business, so to speak.
Love
But I
that.
guess there's always a
flavors.
market for people. There's always some people that are so displeased and unhappy with the outcome of life that they will sign up to any god that promised to help them.
Yeah.
Tritherion is just Corel with better PR.
Yeah.
So I know we're
Yeah.
winding down here, and I mean, this has just been so intriguing and fascinating. But I wanted to go back to, and fit this in. You have an article in Earth Journal 3.
Yep.
On the Crook of Ral, which has been a bone of contention for a lot of people with the banishment phase of what happened, in that Sergeant era. And so this is Earth Journal 3, page 18. So we're going back to what year is this?
Late 90s? Early...
It's probably 93 or 94, because that's my grad school email address.
Yeah. Is it? Okay. Well, there you go. I guess this happened. This article came out while, From the Ashes had just popped, and you're given your campaign uses on it. And what were your thoughts when you were putting this together?
So this is one of those where I do this a lot in the realms. I haven't done it as much in Greyhawk, but I love it either way. This is one of those where you have a bunch of different people put out stuff that honestly doesn't really fit that well when I first read it.
Okay.
And so I usually take that as a challenge. And so, so many of the quintessential Greyhawk artifacts were in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, right? And so of all the ones that are mentioned in the old in the old first edition Greyhawk modules, the only one that never had a proper write-up was the Crook of Ral.
Yeah.
Right? And so if I'm remembering correctly, we obviously had WG6 Isle of the Ape, where it plays a key role, and yet it's never detailed what it did. And so I was trying to use that as my primary source material. But you also had Carl Sargent had taken a very different take on it in the From the Ashes book. And then it's been a while, so apologies if I'm getting this wrong. I think around the time there was a dungeon article that came out, a dungeon adventure 41. That came out as well.
You reference it here, Hopeful Dawn.
Yeah, and so that had a different take as well. And so I read all three of those things and said, all right, now I'm really curious what the history of this item is. And so what I tried to do was to take everything that all three of them said as a fact. I don't think there were any contradictions that I couldn't finagle away or explain away. But if I had to have a bias, it was towards Isle of the Ape more than the other two, just because it was the original source for me. And I tried to sort of interpolate. So anybody who's read my turnovers knows that, like, when I turn in a Word doc, it'll have somewhere between at least 24 comments per page where I footnote almost every sentence with what I'm referring to and which published article. And so I had done that for this as well, but I basically went through all three of them, tried to pull out every germane fact that I could and tie them together into a story that I thought was consistent with all three. That is in no way trying to say that there aren't other stories you could weave out of this, and I would encourage the DM to do so. But this was my take on how to merge those three sources into a common source, since that was what was published at the time that I was doing it.
I mean, you have the actual wieldable abilities of the Crook of Ral in here. So, and
Well, I
that's
wanted to make it an artifact just as good as the ones in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So
with
you
penalties
know,
as well.
Now, the interesting question: have you done a comparison to the Kurkara presented in Tasha's Cauldron for 5e
I
that
have
came out?
not.
Yeah, I
It's
haven't
on my.
either.
I
So,
have
but
the
it just
book,
struck me. Okay, yeah,
but I haven't looked.
yeah. It would be
Um,
interesting to see if they have picked up some hints and stuff because you wrote the first kind of specs on it, so to
It
speak.
would be interesting to see if they did or not. I suspect
Yeah.
they didn't, but because it
Yeah.
wasn't officially published. But
Yeah.
I did try to go with what all the published sources were at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting
Um,
to see what kind of different conclusions you and I'm
yeah, as soon
not
as
sure
we
who
hang
wrote.
up, I'm going to go read that right now.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's interesting.
you
Yeah,
also have suggested means of destruction in here too, which is cool.
Well,
And they're
that was to me
specific.
that was a key piece of every artifact.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, over time, some of the later books that I did for the Realms in 3rd edition, we started having the concept of minor artifacts, which were they broke the magic item creating rules that they used in 3rd edition, but they didn't have like some mythical means of destruction. But to me, any true artifact has to have the suggested means of destruction.
Oh yeah.
That
There
makes
has
total
to be a
sense.
way that your 20th level character can destroy this thing as a campaign
Yep.
ending objective.
Mhm.
Every single one of them,
Yep.
if that's where you decide to go as a campaign.
Really, well put. This is another one of those tidbits out there that if you're using it in your campaign, if you're in that from the Ashes era, the Greyhawk Wars era, please, I would suggest going on Greyhawk Online if you don't already. Download a journal number 3 and take the information right
Yep.
out, and then you have it, and it's fantastic.
Yep.
So, and I know there's stuff I'm out here I've missed. A lot of articles and a lot of adventures.
So I did a couple of dragons too, in the Orth journals, right?
I didn't have any. What? Tell us a little bit about the dragon articles.
So I decided to write up 3 dragons.
Oh yeah, I have those. Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So the idea was basic. I mean, obviously, I
Diverse.
had seen some of the ones that were in the realms, and I was like,
Evan Frost.
dragons are such this mythical creature, and yet they're really. I was going through the published sources, and they don't actually include that many dragons in the published Greyhawk adventures. I don't know if you ever gone through and done a count, but there aren't that many named dragons in what I would consider like the original Greyhawk materials. They're very few. And I always thought that was something that was missing, that I could add a little bit of fun to. So, one of them, I'm trying to remember, so Kuprick came out of this great plot hook, I think in the original Greyhawk box set. Right? There was these series of plot hooks at the end that were just fantastic little story starts.
Yep.
And so that Copper Dragon, he was from that. The other ones were more me. So one of them was the one that I put in the on the Isles of Woe, because I just found that story so interesting. I wanted to put something there and give myself a chance to explore it. The Obsidian Dragon one,
Evan Frost,
was there. I forget where it was. I think it was a Dragon magazine, Bestiary or something like that, where they had the I'm blanking on what the name of the dragons are.
Well, Ebon Frost is, Anna has that on her map. I know she's placed Ebon Frost.
Yeah, it's up in
but someone had done a 2nd edition or 1st edition dragon type in Dragon magazine and placed it up there in the Land of Black Ice. And I was like, that's just so cool. I've got to come up with a cool dragon that does that.
Yeah.
So he was from that. And then the one in Divers, what I was trying to go for there was we had the Greyhawk dragon, right?
Yep.
But they didn't only live in the city of Greyhawk. So what would they be like if they weren't in Greyhawk? So Divers seemed like the perfect place to say, well, it's nearby. Clearly they'd have some too. Well, what would a dragon there be like? And that gave me a little bit of chance to explore Divers and the like, which is never as detailed as Greyhawk. So that one was fun too. I just like going new places and exploring.
Yeah.
Anna, do you have the Worm of Woe placed on the map?
No, I don't have the Worm of Woe, but I have Ebenfrost is up
Right.
in the Cold
Okay.
Marches
Well,
and
the
on the
woeful.
borderland between wolf nomads and Ayus.
Well, we have one here
The
we
Cold
need to get
Marches.
definitely
Yep.
as far as a
Oh yeah, the
dragon lair.
Worm of Okay, perfect. Yep.
One, how do you say that, Eric? One Ricathistis?
Yeah, I'm terrible. That would be
Wani Ricathistis. I can't say it
Yeah.
myself.
One you cat
Wani Rockathystis.
Wani Rockathis. All right, there you
Oh,
go.
this yeah. The
So
woeful.
the theory of dragon names is that the name should be unpronounceable by humans, but then they should have
Yeah.
a nickname
Mhm.
like that, like the woeful worm that is pronounceable by them.
Excellent.
There was also a plot hook I did once that I think would be perfect for that Greyhawk feel, which is I always had this idea of this campaign. You start out at first level, and for whatever numbskull reason, you show up at the ancient dragon's lair, and the dragon is dead. And you don't know why. You didn't kill it. You just show up. You're the first person to get there right after the dragon is dead. And the horde is just littered with these magic items that haven't been seen in 1,000 years. And of course, you can't hold on to them all. And every power group in the country or in the region has been like waiting for the appearance of that item to signal that they should march on a crusade or reconquer this city. Or so basically it's the death of the dragon that starts like 12 different wars at once. Because if you think about a dragon, what a dragon really is it says, I'm going to take all these important cultural artifacts like the Liberty Bell or the Constitution and take them away for 1,000 years. And then when you get them back, what happens? Right?
And you get that plus inflation because the market is flooded with gold and stuff up the
Exactly.
wazoo. Yeah.
So I always wanted to start that campaign with, it starts with the dead red dragon, and you just happen to show up. You would have been, crisped into a sin, you would have been burned to a crisp if you had shown up 5 minutes before. But you show up at the perfect time that someone mysterious has killed the dragon and left the entire horde there. What do you do?
So
Wow.
I'm going to ask, did you get that idea a little bit from the movie Dragon Slayer at the end where the king shows up and claims he killed the dragon and they all say, hail the king, Rex, Dragon Slayer?
I maybe subconsciously, I don't think so. I got it more from the idea of like thinking through, I think one of the things that people don't think through enough is different lifespans and what it means.
Yeah.
But how many generations is an ancient red dragon, right? It's like 30 generations. And how much has our world culture changed in 30 generations?
Yeah.
So you have one actor through that whole period, who is putting pieces on the chessboard and taking them off, is pretty much unmatched in power. That time scale difference is just so dramatic. They might knock over a kingdom to find a minor magic item, right? I mean, they're not thinking like normal people because they're on a different time scale.
Yeah.
Some great concepts. Dorgrim just said now he has to run that idea. So I'm like, yeah, we'll do it, man.
I like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also to turn the normal kind of plot points backwards, so to speak. I did one campaign. I started with the final battle. That was the beginning of it, so to speak, and I worked my way backwards, so to speak. So,
I like it.
yeah. So you kind of you started out with so sometimes you have to kind of break the rhythm because I don't like it when adventures become a bit like computer games with the boss at the end and the struggle in the middle and so on. So I wanted to it should be should not follow the same logic every time.
Oh, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
A couple questions from the audience here, and we'll wind down. I don't want to keep you too long, and I really appreciate your time tonight. The couple of publications we haven't discussed yet, and one of them is joint one with Sean Reynolds, I believe was Cloak and Dagger.
Oh yeah, that one was fun.
Yeah.
So that was one of the last books in the 2E era, and oftentimes when you're writing a book at the end of the edition arc for a campaign world is when they're like, we don't need a lot of rules in this book. Just give us some flavor text, because they don't want the book invalidated by the next generation of rules.
Yeah.
And so the whole concept of Cloak and Dagger, I wrote it with Steven and Sean, was to And this would apply just as much to Greyhawk. And honestly, you could steal half the book and put it in Greyhawk, and you wouldn't even notice. Is come up with quiet power groups, and what do they do now? I mean, Sean did that some with the Scarlet Brotherhood, and you can take other takes on the Scarlet Brotherhood as well. But one way to run a campaign for me is to say you pick that group like the Scarlet Brotherhood and say this is an anti-Scarlet Brotherhood campaign, right? We're gonna go to dungeons, but more and more we're gonna get drawn into this big plot around the Scarlet Brotherhood. A very different way, and in fact I think a very Greyhawk way, is to say there are many competing power groups all fighting each other, and so it's not about the battle against one of them, it's about surviving the war between them, and you're trying to navigate through. You're to pick a modern example, the Mandalorian is different than the rest of Star Wars, right? In the sense that he's not really about the rebellion or the empire, he's just trying to navigate a way through it. So if you add 12 more factions to that, you basically have your PCs being attacked all the time by all these different competing groups as they try to work towards whatever objective they've set for themselves. And so Cloak and Dagger was really about trying to come up with examples of power groups in the shadows that play different roles. And you notice the chapter headings are like, the information brokers. You should absolutely have some secretive rumor mongers that are all about gathering information. You should have some assassins, you should have some spies, all these different types of groups operating out of the shadows make for a really cool campaign. So that was the fun there.
A lot of it gets high praise, that publication, and
it was fun to write.
Yeah.
Now, this other one, and I have the Pathfinder. You did work on Curse of the Crimson Throne, and that appears to be the one Pathfinder one that you worked on, and that one is one of those adventure paths from Pathfinder. But the big one that we haven't talked about is those in third edition they did these expedition series, and that's Expedition to Undermountain.
Yep.
So, and it's you and Ed and Chris Lindsay and Sean. Wow, what a team!
Yeah, that one was fun. That was actually really hard though, because Undermountain is probably bare minimum you should be 4th level, probably 7th level before you go in. And you could argue about what level you should be when you go into Greyhawk. But the equivalent book for Greyhawk, I think, was 10th to 20th level, or maybe 10th to 15th. It was a little higher than this one. And I couldn't believe it when they said, you get to write an Undermountain adventure. And I'm like, fabulous. Starting at 1st level. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
How do I do that? So the one that I actually wrote in there is the 1st level adventure.
Okay.
And I have to say, no matter what edition you're playing in, writing an unusual, like obscure monster, not just like goblins and skeletons, but like trying to be really creative and cool and yet keep it 1st level is one of the hardest challenges I ever have. I mean, the sweet spot to me for D&D is probably 5th to 7th level.
Yeah, 5, 7, yeah.
You get Fireball, and you probably don't want to get to 9th level because then the wizard's getting too powerful.
Yeah.
So that's really where D&D to me always worked the best mechanically.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out how to come up with something unique at a low level was really, really hard, but I hopefully succeeded, and some folks had some fun with that. It was a fun little adventure. But when you can come up with some new mechanics or the like, I think that's fun to do.
Well, it sounds like you've really hit a lot of and doing this freelance, you've done stuff you wanted to do and loved to do, which sounds like it's the perfect mix between real life and your hobby, and over these years. And you said you're going to put something on DM's Guild if you get a chance from levels 1 to 18. I mean, I know people would love to see that. And we have some new people who are on. Why don't you just go over that again real quick, if you don't mind, what that idea
sure.
was.
So what I've been doing for fun lately is because I can't stop writing. You know, my day job is an engineer, so I love to write. And so, and you know, the pandemic has been horrible, but it has opened up new opportunities, is what I had said earlier. And one of them is, so I'm running the same campaign for two groups. One is for my son and my nephews and their friends, and that's actually 5th edition, sort of, as in they tell me what the 5th edition rules are and I tell them what happens.
Nice.
And then for the old fogies, I'm running the 3.5 campaign. But I'm basically, the concept I had was, you know, there's a horde looming, and everybody goes, well, that happens all the time, and you know, hordes sweep through and they wipe out kingdoms, but it'd be really hard to put your adventurers against the whole army. And that's kind of my concept, is you start at first level, you learn a little bit more and a little bit more, and all the while in the background, a horde is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And you know, the final adventure, I think, is inspired by the 300. Where it's
nothing wrong with that.
you know, it's you against the whole horde. But by that point, you should have foes from 40 different evil power groups that all want you overthrown, and you've earned every enemy along the way. And hopefully you're powerful enough that and you've earned it, that your party can actually stop the destruction of civilization and take out the horde. That's the goal. So we'll see how I do, but we're well on the way. The young kids are much faster. They're about 8 adventures in out of 18, and the old folkies, as you'd expect, are a lot slower, and they're on the 4th adventure.
Wow, that's a huge difference. But that's the charm of you know, groups can go different directions in speed, and you know, that's what's the wonder about D&D. And I've always said this: I don't know any two DMs that are the same.
No,
Yeah.
you run it very different. Everyone you play with runs things very, very differently.
And that's what makes it fun too, is to play with someone who doesn't have your style and to learn stuff from them.
Absolutely.
I know I've learned from every DM I've played for. You know, there's some things I'm like, I wouldn't do it that way, and there are others who are like, oh, I'm going to add that to my bag of tricks.
Yep.
And any questions for Eric before I?
Oh, I just said this has been a wonderful discussion.
gosh.
I love your way to dig deep into the setting stuff. I really love that. That's wonderful. So
I love the settings.
Yeah.
And the storytelling. So.
Yeah.
Eric, would you like to shout out anything or discuss any other things you have planned, or something close to your heart that you'd like to discuss in closing? It's been the 2 hours flew by, didn't it?
Yeah, they did. I guess I would just say I'm you know, I love the realms, but I love Greyhawk, and I'm thrilled how much people are adopting it and taking it their own. You know, I would definitely encourage people to build their own settings, take the existing ones, modify the heck out of them, or run them straight if they don't have the time to change them. But you know, the fun part is taking your corner, whatever piece strikes you, and just go with it. And that's what I always do. And you know, I really do think that taking what's been written and thinking through the logical conclusions can take you to some really interesting places in terms of how you run your campaigns. I also think what if campaigns are fun, where you change one fact, right? You know, you take the existing setting as is, but you change one thing, like this war was lost, right? You know, what if the Temple of Elemental Evil had won? That would be a cool campaign setting. You know what I mean? And you can, or you know, what if El Clavdra had won and kicked out Lolth? What would happen? You know, you can take some interesting ideas and really run with them. So I just encourage people to be creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like Gary Julian wrote what if the Death Knights would have won in the Great Kingdom. That was an awesome article. Yeah,
he did some amazing stuff with them.
Yeah.
And he chickened out coming on tonight, Gary. I know you're listening. He's been Prophet Smedger's been on the whole time, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It always provides me. I would not have found the information on the polyhedrons without Gary's assistance. So Gary, thank you so very much.
Well, that's what my call out is going to be to Gary for all the wonderful things he's done for Greyhawk all the years, and many years of friendship going back to our original campaign together.
Very cool. Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah.
Anna, you got any quick shout-outs you'd like to do?
Well, first I can report that I got my document scanner a few days ago, and I've scanned hundreds of pages of Lens accounts. So it's more than like 55 PDFs OCR'd and ready to search and stuff from Lens material. And there are a lot of like tedious stuff that is typical Lens, meaning there's a couple of towns. There's like a simple towns map, and then there's like 35 pages of the stats and the names of
Leonard.
everyone in the village or the town, so to speak. So there's a couple of them. So there's all in all, I think, over 200 pages so far. But there's some small gems in there too. There's one that is called The Wildly Inaccurate History of Lendor Isles from 573. That one is a little awesome gem in there. So there are some fantastic ones and some of them ones are kind of, and then there are some intriguing ones that I don't know. It's like the Icy Mountains and the Great Forest. I don't know where to place them. So they will be very interesting because this needs to be shared with the world, so to speak. So we have to find the best way to share it fairly soon. And then others can dive deep into it and tell me and others what they find, because there are some things in it. And there's a calendar where he put in days and what happened and all sorts of stuff. So people that are really into Lendor Isles need to dig into that one and see what they can find. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. So it's coming. Yep. The first batch will come in very, very shortly, and more to come. So, yep.
Yeah. So Anna got a hold of the Lens materials that he said he wanted us to have.
As much as
he was
as
preparing.
Gary, his partner, could find afterwards, so to speak. So because Len was supposed to invite me, but thanks to COVID and his illness, it didn't happen, unfortunately, until he has passed. So now I went over there twice, and we went through and got like, I probably have like 5 or 6 big boxes full of papers and stuff. So I've been scanning them through, taking them one by one, and go through everything that has some sort of interest, I think, for the D&D community, and I'm scanning
Let
them.
me know if you see anything on the deities in there.
Oh yeah, there's definitely things on the
We're
deities.
excited.
There's some deities I didn't even know existed that I think is already in there. And it's the inn of the burning two-headed troll is one that is kind of interesting, and there's a stats for Godzilla is in there, and the
Good land.
Yeah, and then there's the North Coast NPC in history. I don't even know what that North Coast is. It's kind of it's a write-up of something, and it has some cool maps. They're old and scribbly, but they're kind of cool. They're interesting. So that, yeah. And then there's the spheres of influence of the Sul Pantheon of Gods. That's another article he wrote. And it's like a table. A lot of things are like Excel spreadsheets. Len loved his Excel. So yeah.
So we Josh Pop and Jason Jacobson and Grape Ape and a couple others in the community have created the Len Lekarfka archive, and we have the meetings, and
so I put everything in there.
That's going forward to get all this stuff compiled. Which is
so all the stuff that I scan will be part of that thing. So
so we're at it now. It's a wonderful thing the community is doing, and like I said, we miss Len, but we had some fun times with him when he was here. So
I had a session. We had a new session of my campaign, and it's a bit like a Tolkien book. It takes 1,000 pages to get going, so it's slow going in the beginning, and the characters are kind of established themselves. So I hope they can bear with me for another couple of sessions before something really happens. so it takes a long time to get in. So it's
are they still 0 level, Anna?
Oh yeah, they're not even close to first level yet. So they're not even close. So it's tedious. I'll see how many players I actually have with me that can bear with me and my horrible way of running campaigns until they get to first level. And also the new generation of Greyhawk maps I've been doing renders to get like the first areas up. So more is coming about that. So there's a whole bunch of projects going in parallel. So the scanning of lens stuff is one of them and stuff. So but there's more map content coming out, and also my website needs update there's a whole bunch of old content that got lost. So that needs to be reintegrated it into the website again. So because some people have asked me about the old stuff, and
Yeah.
then there's the area around the Patriots of Ulik, or that in Ulik
Yeah,
area
that's
that needs to be
showing on the map
adjusted.
right here under your
Yeah, so,
pictures.
yeah.
Yeah, of where we
That
are.
area
Yeah,
needs to be adjusted because it's one
yeah,
of the oldest part of my map,
yeah.
and I don't think I've even read the Patriots of Ulik when I did it, and then you had the Living Greyhawk content.
Anna,
But I got so
you and
much.
I can knock
Yeah.
that out in an afternoon.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah,
I got so
yeah.
an awesome write up about that took everything into account. So that will be
Awesome.
yeah. So that is coming. An update on that area is coming fairly soon. I hope I can get that out too.
Plus, we need to add the Isle of Woe Dragon too. I mean,
Oh
that's just
yes, yeah.
perfect from
I've
Eric's.
added
Yeah,
that as a note in my map
beautiful.
map change folder, so to speak. I have like a couple of hundred. I usually it's about 400 or 500 items per year that change on the map that I add.
Yeah.
That people tell me, and I find out. A lot of people tell me that's a typo there, there's something missing there, and this whatever.
Yeah.
So and Gasol on the eastern side of the Woolly Bay, that someone pointed me out that one is probably not the best place. So I need to look into that one too to see if we can tweak that a bit and make it better. So yeah, and especially these early areas, because they're done. There's so much coming out afterwards that I didn't even knew existed when I mapped it, and also I didn't know what I was doing that much back in 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago. So I've learned a thing or two. Since then.
And
Yep.
Eric, I'm a little spoiled because Anna customizes her map for my campaign. So whenever
Oh
I
yeah,
need
so
something, I'm spoiled, rotten. But that's
yeah,
okay.
But you're
so
not the only one. I have like 6 or 7 people that are my patrons that I actually do that for. So they come up. So yeah. So that they get custom tweaked versions of the map. That's
Very
one of the
nice.
service.
Yeah,
If you're top patron, then you can get like a personal service at times, and I can come in and have a personal campaign version of it. So yeah.
All right, so let me go through what's going on real quick. We'll do the giveaway and then say goodbye here. We're going to raid into, I think we're going to raid into Stella Luna, and I'll tell you why in a second here. All right, next show is, we go all the way Wednesday night. It is Elf Week coming up, and you'll understand in a second if you didn't see earlier. But our Legends and Lore with myself, Anna, and Greyhawk Mike Bridges, we're going to talk about Surface Elves at Greyhawk on Wednesday night's Legends and Lore, 8 p.m. Eastern. Culture and governments and races and locations of player characters. That'll be a fun discussion on Wednesday. Keep the Legends and Lore rolling. Thursday night, I finished the finale. And by the way, this is Eric. This is adventure number 898 in my campaign, not session. Adventure. So yeah, we're finishing up adventure 898 in my campaign.
Wow.
Yeah, we have about 2,800 settings. Go back to 1980, so it's nice long campaign in Greyhawk, and we finished Crossing into Steel, Trials of Legion Part 5, and Panzashek ripped the heart out of one of the player characters on Thursday night. A nice good kill for the baddies for a change. That was fun. It'll also be a Gamescape 3D giveaway for everyone, and that's the STL files will be flowing if you have a 3D printer. It's a one of the really nice giveaway on Thursday. Then another big show on the level of tonight, right? And I said this earlier. I'm so excited to have on Ed Greenwood and Tony Winslow Bro and Eric Mengi, and we're going to go at it. Anna and I are going to be on the Greyhawks. Anna, hopefully you're on my side.
We'll see. I like the Vincent Branson and the Forgotten Realms Dark Elves too. So I'm kind of torn because I like them both. Yeah, I really do.
Eric has done both as well. So Eric's going to be in the middle, but Eric does a lot in Moonshay and does a lot. He's working on something for Illustrate now too. Tony just wrote had something in the new Candlekeep book. She's one of the authors of that, so she'll be on, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with that discussion. Awesome. Note the special time, everyone. An hour later than we normally come on, 8:30 Eastern. Ed cannot come on till later, so we pushed it back an hour. Please note that time for next week. Some other things coming up. The week after that, we're going to go, and I think we're going to go back to our published adventures Wall of Fame and discuss the 24 we have on the wall that of all timers in the Greyhawk realm the week after, and we'll discuss those, get in depth on some of those our favorites, and really just give us our experiences on that. Someone gave me that idea as they were going through. It was Gabbin number 8 that I talked about them. So what are we talking about? 120 episodes ago. So that's 2.5 years ago. So we need to really jump into that. And then the week after, we're going to have a doubleheader event. We're going to have a 2 Thursday weeks adventure and a Saturday special. I'm going to throw these both up real quick. So the 900th adventure will be a regular Thursday to celebrate the Ancient Awakening, and then a special game on Saturday the 30th, which is called Dying Icy Heart. They're both interconnected, and the special guests, if you're still on, Time Lord's wife is playing. She's taking Amy's spot. Anna's in it. Mike Disney, Chuck Cumbo are all playing in that one, along with a couple of my regulars, and then my regular group on Thursday. So there'll be 2 adventures going on at the same time, both in the Principality of Ulick. It's an idea that Bill and I have been working on. So that'll be our 900th celebration. 901st one, we'll do a Troller Games adventure. So other than that, if I missed something, I'm sorry, but let's do the giveaways.
The next Legends and Lore.
Yeah, is the Surface Elves.
Oh, yeah.
Surface Elves, yeah. We don't go 2 weeks out on Legends of Lore, Anna. So,
no,
Eric,
we
normally
only
we're
go
like, what are we
once,
going to do next week when it's that day? And we're like, so this is...
Since we talk about Drow and the Dark Elves Sunday, then we can talk
Surface
about
Elves
the
first,
elves
Dark Elves second. Absolutely. Let's do those giveaways, and then we'll... all right, let me set this up. And Eric, thanks. What a fun night. Hope you had a good time. I'd love to have you back too.
Coming on.
No, I'd be happy to. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with you both, and amazing, great questions, and lots of fun stuff to talk about.
Look,
wonderful. Yep.
Mark down in your calendar down the road during GaryCon, the Sunday evening of the end of the week GaryCon. I have an Ask the Experts panel. Maybe you'd like to join. Gary is definitely on that one. We had Leonard for the GreyHawkCon one, but unfortunately he's passed. Malden, Dennis Tetra is supposed to be on it. Maybe that would be one you would like to participate in.
Sure, let's talk about it when we get a little closer.
That sounds wonderful. All right, here we go. First winner, you get your choice. If you want the Reaper gift certificate or the Troller game gift certificate, you let me know, and then I'll give the other one to the other one. The second winner, first winner, Time Lord's wife. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So Time Lord's wife, you have won your choice of whichever one you want on there, Reaper or the Troller Games one, and I know she's hanging out still. And if she doesn't say anything, I will choose for her. Or while there's the second one, choose. And then the second one, you ready? Second winner is Long Shot. And I just saw you chatting. So Long Shot, you got it, man. Since Time Lord didn't speak up, which one do you want, Long Shot? Do you want the Troller Games or the Reaper? Your call on that. So I know I saw you.
Troll Lord, yeah.
All right, you got Troll Lords, man. And I'll give Time Lords to the Reaper one. So I normally don't raid into a video game streamer, but I'm going to tonight. All right. And it's Stella Luna. It's Geek Dice's daughter. She streams a lot of D&D and she DMs a lot of D&D. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm not a big thing on video games. She's playing a video game one tonight, but I never get to raid into her. And she's actually going to be playing in the fun Greyhawk finale event for the fundraiser with us. So I want to just show my appreciation for her jumping in for the St. Jude fundraiser. All right, and so that's why we're going to head out there. Eric, thanks for everything. What a wonderful time.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
This is great. Let me see if I hit. Jay always hits wrong buttons here.
At least once.
I always hit the wrong button. Always. All right, let me set this up.
That was a good right button. Yeah.
I hit the right button that time. So let me set the raid in, everyone. Just want to show my appreciation for her stepping up in the fundraiser. Starting it up. See you Wednesday night, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a good night. Ta-da! All right, we're technically off. right. Exit the broadcast here.